Thank you. Good morning. This is the council meeting of the town of Mono, held on Tuesday, July 16th at 9 o'clock in the morning. This meeting is being conducted both in chambers and by means of electronic participation as permitted by Section 238, subsection 3.1 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended in the Town of Mono Procedural Bylaw 2020-42. Meeting can be watched simultaneously or at a later time on our website. Just as a reminder, the emergency exits are in the rear of the council chamber. We do have quorum today, and members are free to declare pecuniary interest at this point or at any point in the course of the meeting, followed up in writing to the clerk. I'm wondering if somebody would like to volunteer to do the land acknowledgement. Sure. Okay.
We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Mono resides within the traditional territories and ancestral lands of the Tionotante, the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples. We also acknowledge that the town of Mono resides within the treaty lands named under Treaty 18, the Nottawasaga Purchase of 1818. These traditional territories upon which we live and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions, and it is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connections of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources.
Thank you. I have a motion that Council approves the agenda of Session 12, 2024 is circulated. Moved by Councillor Davies, seconded by Councillor Mantalo. Any opposition? Amendments? Seeing none, motion is passed. I have a motion that Council approves the minutes of Session 11, 2024 is circulated. In other words, the previous minutes. Councillor Mantalo moves. Deputy Mayor Nick seconds. Any opposition, questions? Motion passes. We have no proclamations today. Public question period. Fred.
We have a number of questions that were submitted online in advance, Your Worship, starting at the top of the list from Mr. Hussein. He asks, he would like to hear from Council on the updates with letters to the province for speeding issues across Mono. Have we heard back?
We have, and it is indicated in Schedule A of our agenda, and I've written letters out to 40-plus municipal leaders and others, including this council, as to my reaction to the letter. It took over 160 days for the Minister of Transportation to respond. He did not directly address a single thing in our original letter. He did not refute any of the statistics or assertions. It is the worst sort of form letter that comes from government when they really don't want to tackle your problems. I don't give up on these things, and I will be pursuing the problem. And we can feel free to talk about it under Schedule A. Unless anyone wants to chime in now. I mean, I think I sent something out to council indicating my displeasure. Okay. Next question.
So the next question also from Mr. Hussein, and he notes this is a subject near and dear to his heart, but would like to know why Mono-Adjala Townline was not paved for its full length.
Well, Matt can speak to the issue of the sort of thresholds we have to hit in order for a road to be paved, and maybe what the current cost of paving is per kilometer.
Thanks, Mayor Krillman. Yeah, so the majority that's paved on Mono-Adjala Townline is the Adjala's maintained portion from Highway 9 up to 15 Sideroad. The other segment that's paved is from Highway 9 down to 30 Sideroad. I'm not privy to the reasoning or rationale behind why those stretches were paved back in the day. We monitor all roads every 3 years, 3 to 4 years. We try to do traffic counts on every road. We have not seen a spike at all on Mono-Adjala Townline. It sits around 150 to 200 vehicles per day on average. As council has directed staff, we will be coming to council in Q3, end of Q3, with the road management plan. So that'll give us a little bit more information as to what we do with our roads. But right now, Public Works applied maintenance gravel to it, as I previously mentioned in previous meetings, and we're pretty happy with how it's holding up. We patrol it regularly. We monitor all our roads. It's held up really well, considering we've had a lot of severe storm events in the last few months. So.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, what is the vehicle per day threshold at which you start to think about paving may be worthwhile?
Thanks, Councilor Magdalo. Traditionally, council's looked at 400 vehicles per day as a trigger to start looking at roads.
And Matt, my recollection is that the cost per kilometer of reconstruction of a road for purposes of paving is somewhere approaching $1 million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Per kilometer, I should
Per
say.
kilometer, yes. Yes, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for the information, Matt. I guess the key, because this question keeps coming up, and as a person living on a gravel road, it's certainly, I drive very slowly, so it doesn't splash up on my car when it's wet or when it's dry. I mean, there are differences living on a gravel road than living on a paved road. But I guess my thought is that this question keeps coming up, and particularly from this same resident, and it's kind of like, can you get involved with when we have our budget discussions and really see? It's all very well to say how much the road costs, but the real crux is what kind of money do we have? Where does the money come from? Infrastructure is becoming a large problem across the country, I think. Certainly in Ontario, it's obvious that things are very expensive and needing to be replaced, maintained, rebuilt, all sorts of things. So it's so hard for us to answer this question just in a vacuum, that it isn't just that one road and what the condition of that one road is. It's the whole road study. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in Q3, but also how that pertains to our budget discussions. So that's when I would like to see citizen engagement. Thanks.
Well, and I just add that I think budget time is appropriate because we can see what impact it would have on our tax rate if we were to agree to this. And I would also state that for every time we hear from this ratepayer, I hear from at least 3 others who do not want that road paved and who value living on a gravel road, and they do not want it turned into a speedway. Matt?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly it. There's Public Works receives a lot of concerns for speeding, this council does. So paving roads generally come with higher rates of speed. You need the width, you need the drainage, you need there's lots of things that go into it, which that road management plan will discuss. We also have a lot of infrastructure that's starting to age. We have approximately 80 kilometers of asphalt currently, and it's all coming to a point where we need to start repairing and replacing it. We have taken steps to preserve the asphalt with crack sealing and taking shoulders off to get the drainage off the road, but it doesn't discount the fact that we need to replace those roads as well. So, and then we also need to maintain the other 180 kilometers of gravel roads, which we're currently doing with last year's budget with $500,000 plus $50,000 in labor. So $500,000 being material alone, and then $50,000 in labor every year for maintenance gravel, and that's only going to go up.
Fred?
Yeah, and I would also point out to council and the public that's listening that we actually have a much higher priority road than the Mono-Adjala Townline, because we've been trying for years. And traffic volume is only one factor that we take into account when we put asphalt down. The other is the importance of the route for a detour route. And we have the blind line between the 15th and 20th that we've been trying to put asphalt down for now at least a decade. And twice we've applied to the province for a grant for that road, and twice we've been turned down. That road is the detour route when Highway 10 closes. And I've had to drive it during a detour, and from the 15th to the 20th, it's gravel.
Absolutely. It's what you see a lot of the time when, you know, especially with these other centers that are developing a little bit more, Shelburne and Orangeville, you know, Alliston, you get these roads north, south, east, west. If they start to be paved, they divert traffic off of the main roads, such as the provincial and county roads. And, you know, reading the road rationalization plan that the county did, the idea is to connect the communities, the east, west, and they've identified, you know, Hockley Road is connecting communities, and highway, all the other county roads within Mono. So that's their goal. And, you know, paving roads that are adjacent here in Ontario, any of the north-south roads through Mono, it draws traffic off of the main road. So that's something that we have to consider, because then the level of service has to go up on that road.
Ralph?
The speaker has also compared the paved roads that are paved portion of the Mono-Adjala town line to the gravel portion, and as if the paved roads is a plus. And it really, in many ways, it isn't. I drive the road Mono-Adjala town line, the southern part, frequently, and it's a major problem with potholes. And potholes are harder to fix in a gravel road, and they're not fixed very frequently. So I would much rather drive on a gravel road than drive on the Mono-Adjala line, because there's at least 3 spots where I have to really slow down because afraid I'm going to get a pinch flat in one of the potholes.
I think I can add a theory as to why the section from the 30th Side Road up to Rosemont was paved. It may have something to do with the business that was built many years ago on the Adjala side that was the host of the Rosemont Fire Department when we created that department, and before the current fire hall was built. So that may have some bearing on why that section of road was paved. Again, just speculation on my part. So next question.
Next question, also from Mr. Hosen, and he asks, are the DEI meetings still being held at Town Hall, and can the public participate? And goes on to suggest that he's experiencing an increase or an outburst of discrimination within the community.
Would our DEI representatives like to address this?
I think the committee would be very interested in hearing more details about the discrimination that you're referring to, Anthony. I sit on that committee. It does meet at the town hall. It's publicized within our website when the meetings are, and you're welcome to attend. And if you have some information for us, we'd be very pleased to hear it.
Thank you. Mike?
Your Worship, just further to Councillor Mengtelo's comments. So the committee's sort of on summer break right now. They'll be commencing with their meeting in September, and as Councillor Mengtelo notified, the agendas are available online. Subscribe to our website.
Thank you. Fred, next question. So this is the issue of a left-hand turn lane onto Campbell Road from Highway 10, and I think we were all the recipients of a letter petition for that, and I certainly have responded directly and talked with a couple of people who live on Campbell, and it is a very, very dangerous turn, like seriously dangerous, and it has been on our list for MTO to address for many years, and we make as much progress on that as we do with putting lights at Camilla or fixing the the lane that disappears magically to the west of First Line on Highway 9. So we will keep the pressure on MTO to make those changes, as well as an advanced green at Hockley Road and Highway 10. That's something that has been asked for as well. Ralph?
Sonia, thank you for bringing that up, and I received your letter. It is a dangerous spot, and I couldn't agree more with you. The fact that MTO has not responded to most of the requests that we have made doesn't mean that we should stop contacting them. And I would encourage you, and I think there's 12 or 15 of you also living on the Campbell Road, that you all individually contact the ministry and try and put as much pressure as possible, and let them know if it keeps coming up, they're more likely to respond to it. And I think we just have to keep knocking at the door. I know John has been doing this very well for a long time and is very frustrated by the lack of response. But I think that's not a reason for stopping to contact them. And if you individually contact the ministry, that'll have some effect.
And copy the MPP. Yes. Everything you send to the ministry should be copied to the MPP and request a reaction from the MPP.
The next question also pertains to roads, and specifically this time Highway 9 at Mono-Adjala Townline.
So this is an eastbound turning lane on 9 to. I'm trying to see this in my mind's eye. Ralph, does this make sense to you?
Yes, very much makes sense. This is a need for an eastbound turning lane on Highway 9 when you're turning onto the Mono-Adjala town line. I know there have been major accidents there. In fact, when I go up the Mono-Adjala town line, as I do quite frequently, I try not to make that turn and turn at the airport road and go across at Highway 5 because it's such a big risk. And I think that's the same answer, Marina, that we need to keep pounding away on the ministry and our MPP, and eventually I think we'll get some action there.
I should indicate that the county has been successful in getting an audience with the Minister of Transportation at the forthcoming AMO conference, and I am part of the delegation that will be meeting with them. So while I may not be able to touch on all of these issues, we can certainly prepare something to be left with them in writing.
There were two other questions, Your Worship, but both pertain to the noise bylaw, so I recommend that those comments be forwarded and aggregated with comments for the noise bylaw.
Okay, the website will indicate when our public meeting is. It's August.
It's the meeting in August, which I have to check. I believe that's the 20th.
Okay. And we have a survey. We have a survey out that I rather suspect is breaking records in terms of the number of people who are responding to it.
Response has been excellent to the survey to date.
Okay. So if we can just defer the noise bylaw issue until we get into the nuts and bolts of the bylaw, and especially the schedule, which is attracting the most amount of attention. Are there any other individuals online who have questions? Seeing none, we have a delegation.
Her microphone just went on.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Sherman?
I'm gonna have to go now. Yes, it is, Ms. Sherman. Hi, sorry about that. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm here to represent my client, Kathy Cavello. And we are here. Kathy, are you online?
Oh, Ms. Sherman, if you can just hang on, Fred?
So we have that scheduled as a delegation at 10 a.m.
Okay. Ms. Sherman, can you come
Okay,
back?
so not now?
Can you come back at 10
Yes,
o'clock?
I can.
Okay, I appreciate
Sure, I
that.
can. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Watson is here to address our asset management plan. If you could come forward, sir, and just introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Simcisco. I'm one of the managing partners with Watson and Associates Economists. It's a pleasure to be joining you here today. It's my first opportunity to be here in person. I've had the pleasure of working with the town for a number of years now, but it seems that everything's been virtual for the most part, so certainly a pleasure again to be joining you in person today to present the asset management plan. So as you are likely aware, Watson and Associates has been working with the town for some time on the development of an asset management plan. And the main objectives of the asset management plan that's in front of you today are threefold, as summarized on the slide here. Firstly, this document brings the town into compliance with the July requirements of Regulation 58817, which I'll speak to in a little bit more detail shortly. Secondly, this document establishes a levels of service framework, which defines the different measures and metrics that will be used by the town moving forward in measuring the performance of its assets and service levels that are being provided. And then thirdly, it establishes some preliminary funding targets in terms of the funding that would be required to sustainably manage these assets over their full lifespan. As was mentioned in some of the earlier conversations, infrastructure is always aging and at some point requires either full replacement or rehabilitation renewal. And so the purpose of an asset management plan is to lay that out. And one of the aspects is the financial component, understanding what that sustainable level of funding or annual reinvestment would be to sustainably manage these assets over their full life cycle. So to provide a little bit more in terms of the regulatory context, so municipalities across Ontario are required to develop asset management plans for their assets under Regulation 58817. And that regulation was introduced back in 2017 under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. And recognizing that there's quite a bit of work involved in developing these asset management plans, the province did give municipalities several years to come into compliance. The first milestone in achieving compliance was the preparation of a strategic asset management policy, which is a fairly high-level document that the town has, as do other municipalities across the province, which basically specifies a commitment or identifies a commitment to undertake asset management planning, identifies the principles that will be followed when developing asset management plans, and also lays out the key roles and responsibilities when it comes to town staff as well as council and the public in the preparation of those plans. And so those strategic asset management policies were required to be in place by July 1st of 2019. And then following that preparation of the asset management policy, municipalities were asked to turn their minds to developing the asset management plan itself. In terms of the requirements for July 1st, 2022, the province asked municipalities to prepare these plans for their core infrastructure assets. And core infrastructure assets as defined under the regulation include roads, bridges, and then any asset involved in the provision of water, wastewater, and stormwater services. And so that plan was completed in alignment with those regulatory requirements back in 2022. Fast forward to this year, municipalities are required to include all of their assets in these asset management plans. So all of the non-core assets, including facilities, vehicles, and equipment, and all the other assets that municipalities own and are responsible for, and that ultimately enable them to provide services to the public. And that's going to be the subject of today's presentation. There is one final compliance milestone, which is July 1st of next year. And by that time, municipalities are required to build on the work that was done in 2022 for core assets and this year for the non-core assets, and extending that analysis to look at proposed levels of service and also including a detailed financial strategy in the asset management plan as well. And so in line with those regulatory requirements, the development of the town's asset management plan or is being completed in a phased manner. And as I mentioned earlier, we were involved in the development of the first phase of the asset management plan, which was completed in June of 2022, with a focus on the town's core infrastructure assets at that point in time. And the asset management plan that was prepared in 2022 for core assets included summary information on those assets. So what is their extent, what length of roads, how many bridges there are. It contained information on the condition that those assets were currently in at that point in time. It also included or identified a replacement cost valuation for the assets as well. The next pillar of that asset management plan were the levels of service. So it identified the current levels of service that were supported by the core infrastructure assets at that point in time. And then finally, the plan identified a 10-year forecast of the life cycle activities in terms of replacement and renewal rehabilitation that would need to be undertaken to generally maintain the current level of service. Very similar contents are found in the asset management plan that's in front of you today with respect to the non-core infrastructure assets, where again, this report is mainly answering the question of what do we own as a municipality, what is that infrastructure worth in terms of replacement cost valuation. It identifies information on the current condition of those assets. It then identifies the current levels of service supported by those assets using different performance measures and metrics. And then again, it includes a preliminary 10-year forecast of what replacements are expected over the next 10 years in order for the town to generally maintain the current level of service that's being provided. I would note that these first two phases, including the report that's in front of you today, are really more of a information report or a statement of facts. It's not a plan per se in a traditional sense of the word. The final phase of this project, of the development of the asset management plan, is where this is going to turn into a full plan. Because by July 1st of next year, this work will be further extended to not just identify what the current levels of service are, but to take a critical look at that and to say, are those the levels of service that we as a municipality envision providing into the future? And the asset management plan by July 1st of next year will be required to identify specific targets or proposed levels of service for each service area. It is then going to need to identify the life cycle activities that need to be planned for in order for the town to achieve those proposed levels of service. And then all of that is going to result in the identification of the level of investment that would be required to provide those levels of service. And then that will need to be accompanied by a financial strategy, which is going to look at, relative to those life cycle expenditures and those funding needs, what is the level of funding that's currently available, that's budgeted within the tax levy, within user fees for things like water services, for example, and is there an infrastructure funding gap that currently exists? And if there is, the plan will need to be very specific in identifying how that gap will be managed. And that can be done a number of ways. It could be done by committing to a higher level of funding to meet those level of service targets, or in some cases, revisiting the level of service objectives or targets to bring them more in line with the financial reality of providing those levels of service. So really, asset management planning becomes really a balancing act between the level of service that an organization or municipality wishes to provide and the financial requirements of doing that and bringing those two things into balance. So again, that financial component and the identification of those proposed levels of service is something that's going to be developed over the next 6 months to a year in preparation for meeting the July 1st, 2025 requirements of the regulation. So again, for the purposes of today and the report that's in front of you now, again, it's answering those main questions of what do we own in terms of these non-core infrastructure assets, what are those assets worth, what condition are they in, and a preliminary forecast of the replacement and renewal needs of that infrastructure for the next 10 years. So with that contextual piece out of the way, the next portion of the presentation, I will provide some key highlights from the report that's in front of you. Firstly, focusing on a summary of the assets or the state of local infrastructure portion. So in totality, and just to put this into proper context, we did want to look at the total valuation of the town's assets. So we took the valuation from the 2022 asset management plan for core assets, added to that the non-core assets that were captured within this document. And what we see is that in total, the town's infrastructure assets are valued at just under $335 million. And so that represents an investment of about $105,000 per household. So certainly a large amount of infrastructure investment that has been made historically, and that's on the ground and in the ground to provide services to the public. Now, of that $335 million, about 13% of that, or about $43 million, is related to the non-core infrastructure assets, which are included in the report that's in front of you today, with the greatest share of that 43 million being related to facilities. There are about 11 facilities that are included in the plan, valued at about $14.2 million. So that represents about a third of the replacement cost of the non-core assets. The next most significant area by replacement cost valuation are fleet and equipment assets, which represent about just over a quarter of the replacement cost of non-core assets at just under $11 million. And in that fleet and equipment category, we see things like vehicles, so pickup trucks, plows, various large pieces of heavy equipment, as well as smaller equipment items, including IT equipment, park furnishings, appliances within buildings, and so on. The third most significant area by replacement cost valuation are road-related assets or transportation assets, which represent about 23% of the total replacement cost value at about $9.8 million. These include guide rails, sidewalks, pedestrian walkways, as well as streetlights. Again, all the road-related infrastructure, which was not included in the 2022 asset management plan. And then the final category are land improvements, which represent about 19% of the total replacement cost valuation of these non-core assets. And within that land improvements category, we find things like sports fields and courts, park shelters, play structures, trails, and so on. So that's a high-level summary of the assets that are included in this plan and their total replacement cost valuation. The next section, I'll speak a little bit about the condition of these assets and how that was determined and that was reflected in the document that's in front of you. So the table on the slide here provides some information on the approach that was taken to establishing what the current condition ratings of these non-core assets are. Then also provides some recommendations, which I'll speak to shortly. So first of all, for facilities, the condition of the town's facility assets has not been formally assessed to date. From time to time, municipalities do undertake formal building condition assessments, which require typically specialist expertise to come and look at the buildings and establish what the current condition and remaining useful life of individual components, from the roof to the flooring, interior finishes, would be. So that hasn't been completed to date. So it's not something that's reported in this iteration of the asset management plan. When we look at all the other three major asset classes, including fleet and equipment, the land improvements, and the road-related assets, oftentimes those don't get physically assessed for condition. So we're looking at what is the age of the individual assets relative to their useful life expectancy. In other words, how close are the individual assets to the point where we would expect them to require replacement. And so that's used as a proxy for the condition that those assets are in. And so that's reported as this useful life consumption or remaining useful life percentage for those assets in the asset management plan. There are some recommendations that have been provided, and we're going to be working with town staff on further unpacking that as part of the next phase of the asset management plan, looking at where can we supplement or augment those age-based condition ratings with observed condition of the assets based on staff's knowledge of the reliability, how well the assets are currently performing, recognizing that in some cases we can have assets that are operating beyond their useful life expectancy that continue to be reliable, don't require a lot of maintenance, and so on. So we're going to be looking to further augment those age-based condition ratings through the next phase of the asset management plan. So then, to provide a high-level summary of the current condition profile of the town's assets that have been rated based on this age relative to useful life approach, On the slide here, we have a summary of how the fleet and equipment assets are distributed by useful life consumption percentage. So seeing where we see the green and the light green, those indicate assets that are within 90% of their useful life being consumed, where we would still expect those assets to perform well, to be generally reliable. As the assets get closer to the end of their useful life, so within the last 10% of their useful life, we start to rate them as being in a fair condition, so that's where you start to see the yellow color show up. And then once we see assets that are operating beyond their typical useful life expectancy, that's where we start to characterize them as poor or very poor, not necessarily indicating that they're actually performing poorly, but they're getting to the point in their life cycle where replacement is expected sooner rather than later, and we might start to see reduced reliability and so on. So again, based on that age assessment, they would be characterized as being in potentially poor or very poor condition. So just something highlighting again that those assets are expected to require replacement sooner rather than later. Overall, in the fleet and equipment category, the overall condition rating based on a weighted average based on the replacement cost is a condition of good. So on average, the assets are operating within their life expectancies, although we do see some assets, as you see towards the right-hand side of the illustration, that are in that poor and very poor condition state, most of them being within the parks and recreation area, just simply reflecting the fact that those assets are still in use in operation beyond their typical useful life expectancy. On the next slide, we have a similar summary, this time for the land improvement asset category. Again, overall, the condition of these assets is good, as was the case with fleet and equipment. But we do see the number of assets in this category reaching the end of their useful life, as you see with the larger yellow bars towards the right, and also a relatively small portion of the asset portfolio that's operating beyond its useful life expectancy. But again, across all the categories within the land improvements asset class, the assets are in the good to very good condition state on average. And then the final summary is provided for the road-related or non-core transportation assets, where again, overall, the condition of these assets on average is in a good state based on age relative to useful life, although there are some categories of the road-related assets that are, again, aging closer to or in some cases beyond their typical useful life expectancy, that are showing up in the fair to poor or very poor condition, which is indicating that we would expect replacement sooner rather than later. So having looked at the summary of the condition ratings that are reflected in the plan, the next pillar or component of the asset management plan is the life cycle management strategy. And so this is looking at what are these life cycle activities, again, in terms of replacement, renewal, rehabilitation, that we are expecting or need to plan for over the next 10 years. And I'll describe the different approaches that were taken in establishing that forecast. And then also recognizing that a number of these assets have lifespans well beyond the 10-year forecast period. We want to make sure that we're taking a full life cycle view. And so we've assessed those assets over their full lifespan to establish what that sustainable level of funding would be on an average annual basis when we take the full life cycle of the assets into consideration as well. So the second column of the table on slide 10 here provides some information on how those average annual life cycle costs were determined. Firstly, for facilities, because a component level condition assessment has not been completed to date. So we don't have that information on right down to, again, the individual flooring of different parts of buildings. We are relying on a somewhat higher level estimate where we've looked at the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card, which does identify a range of typical reinvestment rates that would be appropriate for different types of assets. And so for facilities, I believe the midpoint of that reinvestment rate range is around 2.1%. So we have applied that annual reinvestment rate to the replacement cost valuation of the facility assets to get a high-level estimate of what that annual reinvestment amount would be. For all the other asset classes, because we have detailed information on the individual assets, how old they are, and what their typical life expectancy is, we've looked at what that averages out to on an average annual basis. When we take the replacement cost of each individual asset divided by its useful life expectancy, what does that produce in terms of an average annual life cycle cost? And then in terms of establishing the specific forecast for what replacements are expected over the next 10 years, again, for facilities, it's a higher level estimate. There's an allowance based on that average annual life cycle cost that's been built into the forecast. And then for all the other assets, we are forecasting out replacements based on the current age profile of each individual asset and the typical life expectancy to tell us when in that 10-year forecast we would expect the assets to require replacement. So then to look at those two components, both the long-run average annual life cycle cost and funding needs, and then secondly, we'll look at the specific 10-year forecast. So the slide here summarizes the current estimate of the average annual life cycle costs that have been identified for these non-core assets. That totals approximately $1.5 million, with the greatest component of that, about 45% of that average annual life cycle cost being related to fleet and equipment assets. The road-related assets or non-core transportation assets represent about 23% of that $1.5 million. Facilities are another 20% of that $1.5 million. And then finally, we have the land improvement assets, which represents about 13% of the average annual life cycle cost. And so that $1.5 million is a preliminary estimate. I think there's some opportunities to refine that, particularly for facilities. Something that we're going to be working with town staff further as part of the next phase of the asset management plan. But again, this is the preliminary estimate at this point in time. And so again, that number is significant because it looks beyond just the needs over the next 10 years, looks at the full lifespan of each individual asset and establishes what that sustainable level of annual funding would be to maintain these assets in an acceptable condition and allow them to provide an acceptable level of service moving forward. And then on the next slide here, we have a summary of the 10-year capital expenditure forecast that was developed as well. We see that the average capital expenditures over that 10-year period average about $1.7 million. That is somewhat higher than the long-run average of $1.5 million that was identified on the previous slide. And that's largely driven by what you will see in the very first year of the forecast under 2024. There's the red portion of the bar, which represents what we're referring to here as a current backlog, simply meaning that that captures all of the assets that are currently operating beyond their useful life expectancy. So based on that age-based forecasting, those are coming up as, in theory, requiring immediate replacement. Again, that's not necessarily the case. This is a preliminary estimate and something that, again, we'll be working with town staff very closely on as part of the next phase of this project, is to make sure that those are actual needs. And in some cases where the assets may be aged beyond their typical useful life expectancy but continue to be reliable, those replacements may not need to happen until 2, 3, 5 years down the road.
Can I ask a question? That kind of confused me at the time. I mean, the backlog in 2024 is a very large number, a very large percentage there of all of what we're saying going forward. Why wouldn't you project that there would be also like a leftover backlog every year?
So it's a very good question and certainly something that will be addressed through the next phase of the project. So at this point, this is strictly saying based on the age profile of the assets and their typical life expectancies, there is this apparent backlog. But as part of the next phase will be, and particularly as part of developing the financial strategy, is kind of smoothing that out, right? And recognizing the fact that that backlog, it may take several years to eliminate. And the other thing to recognize is that, again, this is a theoretical backlog based on age. And we know that, again, we can have assets that maybe we have a vehicle that has a typical lifespan of 10 years, but maybe we have one that just hasn't quite been used as much as others of a similar type. And so it might last us 12 or 15 years. So that's the piece that we'll be working on with town staff as part of the next phase of this project.
Can I inquire as to how we compare with other municipalities of our size in terms of the, not so much the numbers, but how much of our inventory or our items are in good shape versus not so good shape.
So that's a tough comparison to make at this point in time. As I think as we're seeing these asset management plans come forward now, I think we're expecting to do a bit more work around that kind of benchmarking piece to see how municipalities compare in that regard. I would say that when we look at the condition profile based on age, there isn't anything alarming there. If that helps answer the question. I think we've seen and worked with municipalities that have a lot more of their assets that are beyond their useful life expectancies and that really do require replacement with a high level of urgency. The one benchmarking piece that we have started to look at are the replacement cost valuations per household. And it's interesting is that we're finding consistently across the province that the replacement cost valuation of municipal assets is falling in that $100,000 to $150,000 per household range. So certainly what we're seeing in the town's asset management plan is generally aligned with the provincial averages in that regard.
And if council would allow me one more question and a comment. It strikes me that the life cycle process is fairly arbitrary in terms of determining that a particular asset has a, quote, life cycle. We all know that, cars and various things have a, quote, life cycle, but we all drive them well beyond the life cycle. We make do with what we have for as long as we possibly can. I've heard in budget debates the suggestion that playground equipment is now beyond its life cycle and needs to be replaced at, $150,000 or something like that. And at budget time, council has not necessarily jumped at that, because quite frankly, it's still seemingly serviceable, safe. And the question then becomes, as you pointed out earlier, the balance between replacement versus what resources we actually have that we can call upon to do that. And that leads me to my comment. The trajectory of this seems to be in the direction of the province telling us we are going to have to spend money at some point, and they are going to order us to spend money to keep our facilities in the excellent to good and even fair range, as opposed to the determination of them being poor. Am I wrong here? But it looks to me like they're going to be setting targets and insisting that we spend a certain amount of money annually.
I don't believe we have seen any indication to date that the province is intending on setting targets for municipalities. Their intent with the regulation was for municipalities to each establish their own targets. And that's where there's some flexibility, right? And so this plan, or this iteration or phase of the asset management plan doesn't yet identify what those targets are. So that's the missing piece here. That's what's going to be addressed by all municipalities in the next phase of their asset management plans over the next year. And while there are some areas, particularly around water services, where the level of service is driven by regulations, and there may be little to no flexibility around the level of service, for other assets, in your example, the playground equipment, there certainly is some flexibility. And as long as the equipment is operating safely and is serviceable, maybe it's not the latest, greatest, but that might be acceptable, right, for in lieu of or in light of the cost savings that you'll see from not replacing it. So that level, setting the level of service targets is going to be specific to each community. It is something that we're expecting to undertake in consultation with council. I'll speak to that a little bit when we look at the next steps, because I think that's a big part of the process. Part of the next phase is, again, finding that right balance.
Because I could give the province a long list of service objectives in the town of Mono that they should be meeting, that they aren't. And we were talking about one of them on Highway, actually two of them, three of them on Highway 10 alone. So I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander, but I interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I certainly appreciate the discussion, the comments, and the questions. And in fact, we're at the end of the presentation here. I did want to just wrap up with a summary of the next steps, because as I've referred to a number of times, I think the next phase of the development of this plan is really significant. Again, what we have in front of us today and what was also presented in 2022 with the core asset management plans are more information reports. The next phase of this is going to require us to, first of all, do a bit of a refresh of the information for the core assets, recognizing that a couple of years have gone by since that plan was put together. There might be updated condition ratings for roads, just for bridges and so on. So we will be doing a refresh of the data for the core assets. And then we will get into that discussion of proposed levels of service. So looking at what are the current levels of service that are being provided, and are those the levels of service that you as a town wish to provide moving forward. And to help inform that discussion, we're also going to develop the financial strategy, which is going to look at what's the level of funding that's available currently, what level of funding would be required to achieve different levels of service for different service areas, so that we can have that discussion and we'll have an engagement with council at that point in time to find the right balance between costs and levels of service. And again, that's not a broad stroke kind of approach that's going to be drilling into each individual service area, looking at different metrics and looking at what level of service we want to commit to in light of the financial implications of doing so. And only once we go through that balancing act will there be a final asset management plan which the town then can use to follow for years to come in informing the annual budget process, developing long-range financial plans, and so on. So that's all part of the next phase of this project, which again will be completed over the next 6 months to a year. I would also like to note, as illustrated on the very bottom of the slide here, is that once this process is complete, once municipalities come into compliance with next year's requirements of the regulation, starting in 2026, council will be required on an annual basis to review the progress that's being made in implementing the asset management plan. So this is very much a report, a very static kind of document at this point in time. Once we develop the next phase, there will need to be a process developed that's going to annually look at how are the levels of service evolving. Are they getting closer to or further away from the proposed levels of service? And if they are getting further away or not getting to the proposed levels of service fast enough, what are the factors that are hindering progress? Is it lack of financial resources? Is it that the level of service targets were unrealistic, or a combination of factors? And then we'll need to look at a strategy for addressing those factors. So asset management planning certainly is something that's going to move away from just being reports to being somewhat of a living, kind of breathing process moving forward once we get into 2026 and beyond.
Council, questions?
Thank you. I think this is good for us. It also sounds like a lot of work. With respect to facilities, in calculating the annual allowance, you mentioned an average that you'd use, I think it was 2.1%. Are you proposing that we would use that, or as we go forward, we actually would look at our facilities and assess them for their real expected costs?
It is something that I think would be ideal. There are different ways of approaching that. There are, as I mentioned earlier, formal condition assessments that can be done. There are also municipalities we work with that perform those condition assessments internally. So we'll be working with town staff to establish what the best approach is for looking at the actual condition of individual building or facility components to better reflect them in the forecast, and also to better understand that financial requirement over the long term.
So I take it from that response then that you will individualize the assessments to our 11 different facilities.
That would be the vision, yes.
Okay. My next question is to staff. It seems to me that this might involve a fair bit of work and cost. Are we anticipating that we'd be having to outsource some of these assessments, or is this something you think you're going to do it in-house?
So with respect to formal assessments of our structures, council is lucky to have the staff that you have in place right now to assess our big ticket items. We've assessed our septics, we've assessed our roofs. We predict the failure of these roofs. We're not assessing the brick. When the chinking goes bad, we'll fix it and we'll monitor it. I would not, at this time, be looking at full detailed assessments of our buildings because I think they're being maintained in a proper manner. So with respect to outside consultants required to look at our buildings, right now, I don't think there would be looking at a consultant to do that. With respect to ensuring the long-term longevity of these structures, I think these are conversations that we could have with Watson's to ensure that we're looking at the proper items. We assess our furnaces, we know when the failures are of our major components, and we fix items as they come across. So similar to your house, Councillor Manctalo, you look forward to replacing the roof, I'm sure. You look forward to changing the oil in your car, major items and service items. So this will be discussions that we can have with Watson and Associates, how to best move forward. But right now, I don't think we need high consultants on with respect to the conditions of our facilities in general.
I have one comment, if I can. This is meant as a friendly comment. There's a problem for a small percentage of people, mostly men, when you use colors in your graphs. About 8% of men are colorblind, red, green. About 0.5% of women. And of these 8%, about a third of them are totally red, green, and the rest are partial, which I am as well. So when you prepare a graph using colors, it sometimes is a haze. It passes over us. Particularly when you use something like the life cycle expenditure forecast, there are tiny little squares at the bottom there, and somebody who's partially colorblind doesn't know whether it's red or green or what it is. So there are other ways of illustrating, and I just make that as a friendly comment.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the comment and point taken, and something we're always looking for ways to improve how the information is presented and to make it more accessible to as many people as we can. So again, point taken. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had 4 questions, but interestingly, my 3 fellow councillors have all touched on areas of them. So let me just quickly skip over the one that Melinda asked about that slide 12 where you showed all the backlog. Let me just see if I understand it. Remember the chart you showed, we had a great big backlog in 2024. And then it disappeared the next year. And so my first thought was, does that mean in this year we spend all that money to get rid of that backlog? I think that's an incorrect interpretation. If I'm understanding it correctly, you're saying if we spent $1.7 million a year over that time span, all of that would disappear. I'm not sure when, 2024, that's how to interpret that chart, right?
Yes, it would mean that backlog wouldn't be eliminated in one step. It would take that full kind of 10-year forecast period to get rid of that. But yes, your interpretation of if you were to spend $1.7 million per year, all of the capital expenditures that have been identified over the 10-year forecast period would be fully addressed.
My second question was going to be on building condition assessments, but Ralph has asked that, so I'll skip that. My third question, it's a difficult one. I'm not even sure how to phrase it, but it gets back to what you said about the balancing. This gets close to what John was asking you. Let me just sort of ask it in a simple-minded way. Right now, your figures are suggesting for our non-core assets that if we spent $1.5 million a year, we would maintain those assets and the level of service they provide out into the future. That's what I'm getting from this report. And my question really is, and this is why it refers to your comment about balancing, is what discretion does council have every year at budget time? I mean, in one sense, and I don't mean this seriously, but we could sort of say, there's the asset management plan. Les, when it comes to budget time, you know, at least in terms of capital costs, I'm going home to bed because there's no point in me being here as a counselor. You've got the figures out for the next 10 years. I'll go home and have a sleep. Of course, I'm being facetious. But what I'm curious about is the level of discretion council has every year in setting the budget. So for example, I'll make up a ridiculous example. You've given us the number for non-core assets, which includes facilities or buildings. It's $1.5 million a year. All right. What if next year we decided, we have 2 community halls which are in those buildings that you talked about. They provide a certain level of service. Could we just decide, and this has been discussed before, why don't we sell one of them? And then it's off our books. I mean, now I'm not recommending that or even thinking we should do that. I'm asking the question because I want to know, does council have any discretion every year to do that? Let me partly answer it, and never mind my example about the 2 community halls. Can we as council one year say, okay, our asset management plan for non-core assets has $1.5 million a year. Oh, gee, I don't think our taxpayers can afford that this year. Let's go for $1.2 million. And in effect, what we're doing then is changing the level of service for the next few years. Do we have that? Do we have that ability to do that? This gets close to sort of what John was asking.
Yes, council will continue to exercise full discretion over the annual budget process. So this asset management plan is going to be a document that hopefully helps inform the budget process. But the actual needs and council priorities, the community's priorities may change from year to year, or the condition might change because of particularly severe weather, for example, and certain roads deteriorate faster than we expected and need to be addressed sooner. So those priorities change year to year. So again, council will continue to have the full discretion over the level of funding that's provided in each given year. But to your point, if the level of funding is reduced from the recommendation of the asset management plan, that might have the implication of not being able to provide the same level of service in future years.
I have a,
Just a minute, I
yeah.
have 4 questions. Can I just, my last
Sure,
one's
I
very
do
simple.
need to, we have a delegation at 10.
All right. Okay. I know we're talking about non-core assets today, but to go back to our core assets, my assumption is you did not include County Road 8 in the core assets, which, will that be revised before we finalize this? The county is going to require us to take over County Road 8 as a municipal road. I assume it was not in your analysis of core assets.
So I don't know off memory if it would have been included in 2022, but certainly through the data refresh that we will be doing right at the beginning of the next phase, that will be taken into account.
I think, a question that people watching may be asking. Is your message to us that we need to spend 1.5 million more or 1.5 million in total? In other words, every year, we already spend money on assets, replacement of assets, repair of assets, that sort of thing. So the question is, are we talking about over and above what we currently do, or are we saying that this is the cost of keeping up, as it were?
It is the latter, exactly. This is the cost of what it takes to kind of keep up with the replacements as they come up. As you pointed out, the town is already spending a certain amount of that every year, or making a certain amount of reinvestment. So in the next phase of the asset management plan, that's where we're going to be looking at how close you are to that 1.5 million currently.
I made the assumption I made the assumption in asking the question, the answer that has been received. I didn't want the headline from today's presentation to be Town of Mono needs to spend 1.5 million more in order to keep up the standard of our assets.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a really good point. I mean, the whole basis of this is that the legislation came around because we want data. the province wants data, the country wants data, everybody needs data, because infrastructure and assets management is not always discretionary when things come to their end of life. And so this will allow us to have the OREG 58817 allows there to then be comparison of the various municipalities and highlight where a place that's because of weather changes and water availability and so on, it is requiring more money than this projected model, right? That's where we are, as opposed to in the past, we didn't have a number to tell our residents. It just was, here's the tally, look at the budget. Yeah.
Have at it.
Right, thank you.
Anyways, thank you very much for the presentation. My pleasure. Thank you. And I have a motion that we receive and approve the asset management plan, non-core infrastructure assets from Watson and Associates dated July 5th, 2024. Moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Mantalo. Any further discussion, questions? Any opposed? And that motion is carried. Thank you. And seeing that it is now 6 minutes past 10, I wonder whether Ms. Sherman and Kathy Cavallo are online for their deputation.
I am here. It's Ms. Sherman.
Can I just ask a point of order first?
Ed, just one moment, Ms. Sherman.
Just, we have item number 2 has 2 things in it. One says 994192 Mono-Adjala Road, and one says 991492 Mono Road. Is that a misprint? Are these 2 items the same?
Yeah, so we have one property that's being addressed, and the correct address is the 192.
So the 149?
994.
1492 is a misprint.
994192 is the property in question.
Okay. And the next item is not related to it?
It's just a misprint.
Oh, it's a okay.
It's a misprint from in that original
Okay.
Got it.
ref.
So, Ms. Sherman, you're representing Ms. Cavallo?
Yes, I am. I am a mortgage agent who I know Kathy Cavallo for some time now. When she bought the house on Mono, which is just 994192, she bought the house back in 2000, I believe, 3. Purchased in 2000.
Ms. Sherman, we're having difficulty hearing you. And I think we need to cut to the chase. The request of council is that the house that is currently part of our heritage registry be taken off the registry, and this goes back many months. And if I can assist, here, the issue was twofold. Number one, it was a matter of principle. The owner of the house did not want to be on the registry, but moreover, it was forcing decisions having to do with remortgaging that were potentially negative for the property owner. Am I correctly summarizing it?
Right, it is, and you are. But that's not also the point. Is when this house was registered as heritage, Ms. Cavallo was never notified. She was not given any document stating such this house. And we will also like to know why this house, what criteria that this house was registered under heritage.
If I
So
can
we would
ask,
like to remove that status, yes.
if I can ask our clerk to clarify the process for notifying property owners of designations.
So this property, as all
register.
properties that are added on the register but not designated, were sent a letter indicating that this was being done. There is no requirement in the Act for advance notification, so they were informed that this had happened after the bylaw was passed. And in the letter, it explained what rights and obligations they had for appeal.
Okay, unfortunately, Ms. Cavello said she never received such a letter regarding this. Had she had received this letter, I'm sure she would have consulted with a lawyer or myself, because now Ms. Cavello cannot really get a mortgage approval. She has to stay where she is right now, and they have agreed to renew her mortgage. But going forward, this has to be removed from the title of a home, or else she will not be able to refinance or get a mortgage or even get insurance for her property. This is causing a big issue with the title of being heritage. Even though it's just listed, banks, when they give in a home, they go on searches to find out if there's any discrepancy in the home. And if this comes up, which in this case it did, she was denied the mortgage. And the banks really don't care if it's just a title. Once they see it on a registry, that's all that matters to them. They don't care if it's just a title and it means nothing. They don't want that on any list because it brings up a red flag and it causes issue concerning getting a mortgage, selling if something has to happen to her home and she has to renovate. She will not be able to do so, but that's not the point. That's not the case, but the bank don't care. So we are asking,
Ms.
and we are
Chairman,
pleading.
If I can
Yes.
just interrupt, we have a couple of questions here at the council table. Fred?
Sure.
What I didn't understand, Ms. Sherman, is if they did not receive the letter, how did you become aware that it was on a list?
Because when she reapplied for mortgage with me back last year in August, and we sent in the file to the underwriters to get it approved, the underwriters have a due diligence to look into homes to see if there's any discrepancy when they do a registry for the property. And it popped up that this house was registered as a heritage home. And then they called me and they said, do you know this house is registered as a heritage home? I said, unfortunately not. And I'm not aware of this because I gave her, back in 2003, there was no heritage disclosure. And they goes, yes. And when we researched it, then we found it was a heritage home. And I was surprised and she was surprised. So that's how I found out that the house was registered as heritage home.
Thank you.
Do other members of council have any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm just, my question is, why is this taken, why are we talking about, we talked about this before, why are we talking about this 11 months later? She has a mortgage, or she doesn't have a mortgage, or there are all sorts of mortgage companies and mortgage rates and all sorts of things have changed within the last 11 months. That's a long time.
With all due respect, if
Yes.
you're not a mortgage agent, I am a certified mortgage agent, and I could tell you, I have 111 companies that we went to. Not for her, I went to 15 mortgage companies when I was doing her deals, and everyone turned me down because of this reason. They do not register or give mortgages with anything concerning heritage home or any sort of lining. It's a thin line, and we are burning this up now. Yes, she has a mortgage, but it's coming up for renewal, and she's going to run into this problem again, and then she will be left with a home without a mortgage. And that's why we're burning this up. So with all due respect, this is not, it's 11 months, and this is how long we have been trying to get a meeting with the council to discuss this matter.
I believe there was an attempt to set up a meeting with council, but it was canceled by Ms. Cavallo. I just comment that this issue also comes up with regard to getting insurance, and certain insurance companies will not extend insurance to designated properties. Others
That's right.
will.
Yes, that's right. It is. Fortunately, her insurance company, as at the moment, they have no issue. But in the future, that could change because they have to abide with other companies as well. So we don't know. That could change any day, and she could be denied more, insurance for her property. So if something, God forbid, something happened to her home and she has no coverage. So
Basically, I have to stay with the insurance company that I have, and I can't shop around. Because once I do, they will deny me when they find out that I'm in a registry, a heritage registry.
yes. So this is a very big issue. I mean, it may not be a big issue for the city of Mono or for the board who's sitting on here, but it's a big issue for a lot of the clients or people who have homes and not aware of this. If they're not aware of this and they go to renew their mortgage and they come up with this problem, they are stuck. And it's a big issue. And I'm not sure why this home, if you see it here, it's listed as a Gothic
I
home.
don't think why it is necessary to have me on a heritage if it's causing me problems. Secondly, if I have to go and sell my house, the people that want to buy my house and are looking for a mortgage, it'll be hard for them to get the mortgage for a heritage home.
Yeah, so sorry, Kathy.
Ms. Sherman, again, I'm looking at my colleagues here, and I think they have further questions, and I'm going to ask
Go ahead.
our clerk to comment as well. Do you have anything to add or comment on?
So I do want to reiterate that the property is not designated, though it is on the register as having potential heritage value. There are approximately 285 properties in the town of Mono that have similar being included on a register as potential heritage value. As council knows, that what this means is that the only restriction on the property owner is if they go to demolish a building, then they must give the municipality 90 days to review the property and either grant the demolition or proceed with designation. Now, the town has received one other property owner who's made a claim that he's had a difficulty obtaining, I believe it was insurance. We haven't heard this from any other property owners. This is not registered on title, right? So, but of course, if a property owner discloses it to a bank, the bank, I guess, can do whatever they wish. And same with insurance companies. Council might recall that I spoke to the insurance regulator when this first came up, and the regulator confirmed that insurance companies have the right to set any standards that they so wish.
Okay. Well, we're not talking about insurance here. So what is
Okay,
the...
again,
Ms. Sherman, I think we grasp the problem, and I think council needs to make a decision as to whether or not Ms. Cavallo's house is to remain on the registry or to be taken off the registry. My views on this are well known.
Make a comment. Ms. Sherman, you're stating that the house is designated as a heritage home. I'm not quite sure whether you're appreciating the difference that Fred Nixon just outlined between being listed and being a designated home. My understanding is that this home is not designated as a heritage home. It is listed, and that is a huge difference. And if that difference is made apparent to mortgage holders or insurance companies, as I did with my house, it makes a significant difference.
How many times can you make it
Okay,
aware?
Kathy, hold on. I am aware of what you're saying, and I'm okay with it. It's not me. I'm not the lender. I'm a mortgage agent. It's the lender. I think you guys are not understanding. It's the banks that are not understanding that this is just a register. It's not a designation, and they don't want to see this on any registry. It doesn't matter if it doesn't mean anything. They don't want to see this. It's a red flag. Banks don't care what it means. We even had a letter drawn up and given to them, and they still refused it. They still refuse it. They don't care. Once they see it on a list, it's a red flag, and they will refuse to even look at an application. And again, this wasn't brought up to me or by Kathy Cavallo. We only know this because she applied for the mortgage with me. And then when the lender, let's say Scotiabank, for instance, went to research her home, they saw this and they said, turn it down. I went to Royal Bank, they turned it down. I went to a B lender and they turned it down. So again, the 5 banks turned it down and the B lenders turned it down. So the other option is a private lender, and private lenders, interest rates are sky high, and no client wants to go to a private lender. So unfortunately, we will, again, I will stress a lot, if you can, in your kind hearts, and consider removing Kathy Scavello address from this list, would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. We
I
have
had to pay
another
mortgage.
question. Excuse me, we have another question here.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I just am not understanding if the town of Mono has decided that heritage is important. This is a building that's built in 1876. We've received advice that it should be on the register. We put it on the register. The register's not on the title. So I'm not sure that just removing properties when we've made a decision to have a list and designated that these things are important to us as a whole, I'm not sure that that's helpful in the long run to the underlying goals of the town. I mean, there's nothing. There's no other recourse. I mean, there's got to be. If we have had a 280 on our list that has come up because of legislation saying that, you have to get the list organized right away. So we spent a lot of time, our Heritage Committee spent a great deal of time doing this, came to us with this big, long list. It all sounded like it was a good idea. We can't be the only municipality that this has happened to.
No,
And we run the
no.
risk of a building.
Maybe
Just a
the
moment.
homeowner should be considered. The homeowner should be considered of the implications that happen to them.
Ms.
Other than the
Cavallo.
Ms.
town of
Cavallo,
Mono.
I'm-
Ms.
Kathy, hold
Cavallo,
on.
Ms.
Yeah.
Cavallo, if we could let the counselor finish and
It
then
doesn't
I
make sense.
can
Yeah,
help here.
I'm merely asking a question, Ms. Cavallo. I'm trying to understand why this is a problem that can't be resolved with respect to your finances of your house with some assistance at a larger level than just your agent, who clearly
That-
today, Ms. Sherman is telling us that she's not able to help you, and the only answer is to remove it from the list. And I'm saying, we thought the list was important, so do we really want to enter into just removing things without, are there any other avenues? That's my question.
Yes,
you
I
make
could suggest another
Hold on.
avenue.
Okay, one at a time, please.
When you
Kathy?
make something important to the town, shouldn't it be important how it affects the homeowner? It's affecting me. I had to pay more for my mortgage because it was on a registry. It already was the fact that the interest rates went up and I was like stuck. And finally, Shamiza came to me and she had some really good, well, better than what I had. And I had to go with the higher rate because of this. So if it affects the homeowner, why is it that I have to, like when I bought the house, it wasn't on a registry. Nobody told me about a registry. So if you guys decided to do that, that has nothing to do with me or my well-being of like how I'm supposed to maintain this home.
I'd accept that you knew that the
And you-
building was made in 1876. That's a pretty extraordinary
Regardless,
house.
I bought it, I loved it. It has nothing to do with it. So what does that mean? I'm supposed to oblige by that because, oh, it's an old building. So now I'm supposed to be paying more of interest rate for it?
No, I'm
Come on.
not saying that. I'm just saying that it clearly is something that's important. That's all I'm
Yes, I
saying.
love the house.
If
love the
I
house.
can make a,
I
if
bought
I
it.
can make a, if I can make a
Kathy, hold on.
suggestion, Ms. Sherman, I'm going to
Yes.
make a suggestion,
Sure.
and I want to put it into a context. Ms. Cavallo is not the only person who ended up on the registry who wanted to be taken off, and we have dealt with the previous applications. I don't know whether we've granted any, but I think we've turned down most, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Simpson.
One other property came before council for removal for similar reasons, and it was over insurance, and council granted the removal of that property
right.
from the list. And I do think we need to remind council that all properties on the list automatically come off on January 1, 2027 unless the property is designated.
But the province extended that date to 27, yes. Yes, 2027. Here's the other thing, and that is that when this first came up, I think our clerk wrote a letter for Ms. Sherman that clearly delineated the difference between a designated property and property on the registry as a way of allowing her to approach mortgage lenders. So we've already been down the road of trying to re-educate the banks, and I don't think, frankly, we're going to be terribly successful in doing that.
No, you're not.
I'm going to move a motion in a moment, and I don't know whether I'll get a seconder or support, but I do not believe it is a good thing that a property owner who does not want to participate in what is really a good news story, in other words, a registry of heritage properties, should be forced to do so to the detriment of their interest rate or to the detriment of even getting a mortgage. Moreover, it just strikes me, as I said, that if people want to be on the registry, I live in a designated house, and I'm proud of it, and so far it hasn't impacted me. But were it to impact me, I would be the first to say that this is unfair, and something should be done. The business about the way in which houses get on the registry bothered me from day one, that a committee makes that decision, puts it in front of council, we pass a motion, and then the property owner has to basically jump through hoops to get off the registry if they wish. We've changed that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Fred, the committee now approaches the property owner and says, we're interested in putting you on the registry. What do you think? I think we have reversed that position.
Our previous policy or procedure on this included holding a public meeting once the list had been drawn up but not approved and inviting all property owners. That wasn't done the last time due to COVID. So this was a bit of an unusual situation where the bylaw was passed without first informing the property owners.
So can I just say something?
Ms. Sherman, please, we're still discussing the matter here.
Just on a procedure thing, is it not true we have a report from the clerk in front of us that recommends that we take this house off the list?
I don't have a prepared motion.
I have a report here that says, staff recommends that we introduce and give necessary readings to a bylaw to amend bylaw 2012-19, Heritage Register, to remove 994192 Mono-Adjala Townline.
And the same. So the same resolution would be recommended as was in the report that council saw last fall, which is exactly as Deputy Mayor Nix just read.
But just for fulsome completion, we have also a report from our advisory committee, Heritage Advisory Committee, that it should remain, right? So I merely am asking because you're right, Mayor, it's always been a little bit tricky that we have these properties in the town that I came along and have been told that the town values this. So, but it's an individual if you own the house and so on. But I mean, it sounds like a spectacular property if it's still standing from 1876.
Beautiful.
I get my hair cut across the road, so I can sit in the chair and see the house. Now, Mr. Simpson, how do you propose that we proceed? Should we have a motion now, or have you go away and prepare a motion, or should we simply adopt your recommendation or the recommendation of the Heritage Committee?
If council is at this point prepared to vote on a motion to remove the property and whether it carries or is lost, but if council's at that position now where it's prepared to vote on that motion, then I would recommend the motion as read by Deputy Mayor Nix.
Okay. So I'm prepared to move that motion. If I get a seconder, we will have a vote. Okay, so I have a seconder. No, go ahead.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Just a question then on that. If you remove it if you remove it from the list today, we have until 2027 to remove things. So here we are in 2024, we're removing things or to designate it. So the list has been changed in an effort to build more homes faster and all that, right? So, however, being that it's a beautiful home across the street from the barber and so on, that it is not necessarily, the idea is that the town will lose property, right? That people will demolish stuff. So if we get rid of it now and we help this particular homeowner with her predicament, it doesn't mean, this is for the heritage, it doesn't mean that the house is lost forever, correct? There is in that legislation, it needs to come off the list by X date, but it can also go back on after 5 years later if it's still standing and a new owner wants it designated, and, right? It's not the end of the world for this, but it's helpful to this particular moment in time owner of this property.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Totally fair. Is there any, so I have a motion on the floor to adopt the wording of the clerk that the property be removed from the registry. And I think the reasons have to do with, that are unique to this particular property owner and their attempt to finance the mortgage. I mean, this is not a signal to everyone out there that it's open season to come off the registry. And, you know, we've only had one other instance, and it had to do with insurance. But I love the idea of a registry, and I deplore the notion that the province is going to blow it up in 2027, even though they've given it a few more years of life. But I also think that the property owner who is facing hardship as a result of being on the list should be given a break. Any further comments, Ralph?
John, I agree with your sentiment there. What I can't understand is that this property is not on, the designation is not on title, and how the mortgage supplier would find out that there's that this is listed. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't know, maybe some of these
Ms.
mortgage.
Sherman could explain that to us.
Ms. Sherman, do you have any
I'll be glad to
explanation?
explain that, yes.
Yeah. How would they find out if it's not on title?
I will explain. So when you apply for a mortgage, the underwriter will pull up the address on Google. And once you pull up this address on Google, it comes up, it flags it, that it's listed under a list, and then they will do searches. They do extensive searches since COVID for a lot of reasons not to give homeowners, they find ways not to give you a mortgage if they don't wish to give you a mortgage. It's a lot of stuff happening in the mortgage world, and this is why I was gonna suggest something, and it's for the council to do it. I mean, I love the idea of having homes under heritage. I'm not against that at all, because I think it preserves the homes. Yes, it doesn't help the owner in this case, but if the city can actually somehow talk to our mortgage councils as well and let them know the reason, like they have to talk together. If they don't talk together and communicate and give reasons why this is happening and there is no stipulation, the mortgage industry will understand. But at now, they don't know and they don't understand. They're not knowledgeable enough in certain rules and regulation why things has to be done. And furthermore, I contacted my lawyer, our lawyer that we deal with, and there's steps that to take when you're putting a house under heritage. You have to have an easement agreement between the property owner and the municipality that this home is going to be placed under heritage. And with that not being signed, you have no leg to stand on that this is heritage or not.
Sherman, I don't think that's our understanding. I'm wondering whether or not some of these mortgage companies or banks actually check the public record In other words, the town's record for a list of
They do.
designated
We
and,
do.
well, that's maybe how they
We do.
found out as opposed to seeing it on title. Anyways,
That's right, because if the house is so old, so that's why they do this, because once you flag a home being a certain age, they will check every registry to find out reasons to avoid giving mortgages.
we have a
Because
list
houses are old.
online.
Yeah,
We
yes,
have
I
a
pulled it out
by-
offline.
So we do not maintain a list other than the bylaw itself is published.
Okay.
So you would
Yeah,
have
the
to
bylaw
search the
number is
bylaw.
2012-19. That's how I found it.
In any case, your worship, there is a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all those in favor of the motion? And it's unanimous. The house comes off the registry.
Thank you so much. I really
Thank you.
appreciate this. I'm
Thank
very
you, Ms.
pleased. Thank
Cavallo
you all.
and Ms. Sherman.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Was there a vote?
Sorry, did you vote?
Yes.
Okay, I did.
Let's have a 5-minute break.
We are back live.
Thank you. Hello again. Next item on the agenda is our list of unfinished and deferred council business. Are there any questions or comments about that list? Ralph?
CAO is not here.
Go ahead and make it, and we can catch it.
Ralph, your button.
He had mentioned that he was going to meet with his counterpart in Agitos. This is directed towards you, Mike. We're talking about the business list. You had mentioned that you were going to meet with your counterpart in Agitos about the heritage, about the Mono, let me get it straight, Hockley Community Hall and Church, and wonder if any progress there.
So unfortunately, my counterpart does not exist at Atos Edge right now, so as I reported to council last week, last meeting, they have, I believe parted ways was the way that the mayor had commented, so so we did have some preliminary discussions, and I think it's probably in my hands to come back to council with a recommendation.
Any other items on the list? Thank you. Going to bylaws correspondence. First item is the development charges bylaw, and I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw for the imposition of development charges, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Nix, seconded by Councillor Davey. The Treasurer has just joined us, and are there any changes to the development charges bylaw stemming from the public meeting that we had?
Basically, Mr. Mayor, the bylaw before you is in keeping with past bylaws, and it enforces this latest study.
So it reinforces what we had by way of a presentation? Yeah. Okay. Ralph?
I have just one question, and it's about the Schedule B. Les, what is the fourth column? It's called other multiples. In other words, it's not 4 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 2.
Oh, that's if council gets into townhouses. Mm-hmm. That's the other multiples.
Okay.
So basically a townhouse with maybe 1 or 2 bedrooms. But generally our experiences have been standalone residential.
So if you had a townhouse with 4 bedrooms, you'd be at 19 or 29, I guess.
Other multiples, and also like duplexes, or like they're basically talking multi-residential.
Okay.
Okay. So any further questions, comments? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you, Les, for this. I got a comment that it's just so disappointing that there are so many exemptions, but all of this bylaw really just follows the legislation that we are obligated to do, right? Because when it comes to budget time and we don't have the money for all these things, this is kind of why, because
You're absolutely correct, Councillor. But also the legislation gives council the authority to add to exemptions. Not that I'm recommending any to add, but you do have that leeway. But yes, the Act says these are the ones you have to have.
Swiss cheese. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion is carried. And we're in a position now that somebody comes in to build a home with four bedrooms or whatever the new rates apply. Is there a start date or?
That's correct. It's as of today.
As of
passage
today?
This bylaw.
Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is an amendment to the parking bylaw. I know that we've had some direct and indirect feedback about 25th Side Road, and I'm wondering whether council would consider deferring passage of this bylaw until we can get to the bottom of some of the issues raised.
What
Well, I've heard that there's somebody up at the 25th Side Road and Second Line that is not very happy with our proposal up there. And I personally would like to drive out and look at some of these proposed changes,
Your Worship,
which I admit that I have not done. Yes.
that resident contacted me. I have replied. I've checked it with our Director of Public Works. And yes, that person is not particularly happy. I'm not satisfied that the complaints they made have that much validity. I'm not saying they're wrong. What's going to happen is have I got an indirect conflict of interest here, Mr. Simpson? Well, there's the Bruce Trail that goes down there. The point is, it leaves.
If you're advocating on behalf of the Bruce Trail, then I think you may.
I'm not advocating, I'm advocating on
It's
the
just in
public works.
proximity. Just in proximity.
Yeah, they're leaving 60 meters east of the second line, which happens to be the Bruce Trail, which can accommodate 5 or 6 cars if they parallel park. And I don't think it's heavily used, but it does allow a few people who want to park there to park on the south side of the road. That's what the parking bylaw allows. I've sent the people who complained an email that Mr. Donor has seen, and he was satisfied with my response. So my point is, I don't think we need to defer it. I think.
Well,
Mr. Donor, with the 25 side road changes, what areas remain no parking?
Thanks, Councillor Mankelo. There's a stretch from First Line on the north side to about midway point to Second Line that's permissible. We opened up a portion on the south side with the exception of 85 meters to the west of Second Line. And there's a portion just directly east of Second Line on the south side that remains permissible to park. The goal was to investigate our current no parking zones and try to increase some parking areas. The idea that we opened up the south side of 25 Side Road between First Line and 85 meters west of Second Line was to open up some parking space.
I just having a problem putting it together, so I'm asking for the opposite side of the coin. What no parking is still left?
Well, midway point between First Line and Second Line on the north side,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to Third Line.
All the way to Third Line, okay.
And from 65 meters east of Second Line on the south side, all the way to Third Line. As well as Second Line north on the
Okay.
east and west side. So there's that's right.
So that
There's
gets-
a significant amount of no parking. Bylaw has not had, and Fred Simpson may be able to speak more to this. Bylaw has not experienced a high amount of calls or concerns west of Second Line. It's a bit of a jaunt to be able to park where we've opened it up.
So it appears to be that the zigzag turn that's just east of Second Line has no parking on both north and south still. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to get my Google map out to really be, because driving doesn't really help for me, doesn't really help, whereas we're looking at it on a map. So I would appreciate in the future when we amend these things again, can we have a map where you put a red for no and green for go around these places as opposed to the X number of meters and stuff? It's been a bit tricky but I'm understanding it. My question is, right? My question is, for all of the various ones, how many meters, how many cars is really 60 meters? Like how many cars is 85 meters going to park? Because if there's a complaint, and I don't know the complaint, didn't complain to me, nor have you said it, but I'm assuming that they don't want cars to park in front of their house. Is that a big assumption?
probably.
They didn't say that specifically. Their complaint was people have been angle parking, and people have been leaving garbage and diapers
Oh,
and things.
yeah, no, that's
And people
terrible.
have been having picnics on their property.
Oh, well, then that's actually a whole nother thing beside which we need to fix that. That's bad. But with respect to parking for people to be able to come so that they can use the facilities, right? If I guess people were angle parking because you could see that might put in more because my car's only X number of meters wide as opposed to many meters long. So how many cars are we talking when you offer an 85 or a 60 meter range?
Thanks, Councillor Davy. We generally use about 5 to 6 meters for a car, so,
So it's a lot of cars.
yeah.
It's a lot more than 5 or 6 cars.
Okay.
Right?
But this parking that you're discussing right now has always been there since COVID. Like we didn't expand that section. This was considered a safe zone in the first round of the bylaw. Yeah. We skipped the frontage of the individual house that was impacted by the COVID pandemic. And then we open up parking on the south side further to the west to allow overflow that hasn't occurred, right? So, and then second line and everything's all covered off. Still a no parking zone, right?
Okay, thank you.
So if council wants to take this up, I do have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to amend bylaw 2000-12, being a bylaw to provide for the regulation of traffic in the town of Mono, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Mover, Deputy Mayor Nix, seconded by Councillor Mangtalo. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Any opposed? Motion is carried. And then part of the report as well is quite an interesting thing having to do with heavy trucks, and Fred Simpson has provided me with an explanation of why this is necessary that sounded very compelling. Fred?
So as noted in the report, the OPP have canvassed all of the municipalities in Dufferin to come up with what they feel is an adequate heavy truck definition. So I proposed that amendment into the parking bylaw that council just passed, and this cleans up the other bylaw where that definition appears. This definition meets the needs of the OPP to better enforce heavy trucks.
If I could point out too, this definition is consistent with the definition of heavy truck all across Canada. 4,500 kilograms is typically where a single axle pickup truck would go to a tandem axle. You have, okay, typically, once you're over 10,000 pounds, that's when you get into 4 wheels on the back axle.
Okay, I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to amend bylaw 2018-39, being a bylaw to prohibit heavy trucks on specific town of Mono highways, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Mover, Councillor Davy, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nix. Any further questions, comments? And any opposed? That motion is carried. Next bylaw for consideration is the 20th Sideroad former Deviation road allowance matter. And Mike Dunmore, this is good news, I gather.
Yeah, this is what I would consider the final step in getting the condominium agreement finalized. Been working with Mono Hills Golf for past 2 or 3 months to get that into great shape, and this land exchange was, as identified in the clerk's report, was something that was discussed back in the original findings of this, and it would finalize and relieve the town of this deviation road, which is only utilized by the Mono Hills Golf, and it would give the town the requirements for a road widening in front of the Mono Hills that was discovered when we designed this road. In 2012, it was engineered and this, when this all, so this road has been designed, but council of the day did not proceed with the rehabilitation of it.
Any questions or comments? Councillor David?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so again, a visual, I have a little difficulty. I remember the discussion and that it made sense, and I see the deviation and so on. And so we're gonna give that to them so that, but where is our road widening going to happen? I didn't see a diagram for that, and then who's paying for that and when's it happening? So multi-part question.
So if I could share my screen, referring to the report. Yep.
Oh,
Yep, just give me a couple seconds. So this is the deviation road, seen here, moving along to the west, and the traveled road is out here. This can be better seen on the, this is our data from our GIS. And so that's the deviation road. Here's the road widening right here. And if I pull up our GIS, so this is the road widening being part 1 on this plan. And this is better described and shown right along this area here.
but we're not actually physically widening the road.
If
Are
the
we?
town, so like I said, in 2012, Council of the Day approved the rehabilitation, the engineering and design of 20 Sideroad. During that process, we deemed that there was not enough adequate room. Not all roads sit inside of the 66-foot road allowance that we own. There's a big drop-off on the north side of the road. So in order for council to proceed with the rehabilitation of 20 Sideroad, we would need this widening. So that's when right, so if council in the future decided, like, it was pulled from the budget the very next year. So we finished the design in Public Works, and we needed this road widening, and this is where conversations started with Mono Hills prior to their condo discussions. Because we didn't need the deviation road, it's the driveway. Unfortunately, I don't have my air photo right now, and I closed the program. It would help better explain it. But unfortunately, the driveway for Mono Hills right now comes off the traveled road in here and comes totally down into
So it's
the,
for future purposes.
for future purposes, exactly. And this, as you see here, just let me get this rotated. This is probably a better picture to visualize the roadway. So here's the deviation road right here, and here's the widening along the east side. So 20 Sideroad, traveled road is up here. It deviates, it curves. The deviation road is the only user is the access to the Mono Hills. So they're the beneficiary, and the town would be in transfer or exchange. The town would be the beneficiary of the widening, and Councillor Davey, with respect to cost, this is all borne by the applicant, borne by the Mono Hills. This is all contained in their subdivision or condominium agreement that they shall register the deeds and transfers, et cetera.
Because the part where you've been showing us on here that's widening to the below, I don't know which direction that is. East is what you're saying, but my mind's not thinking that way at the minute. But that land at the minute is part of lot number 14 or whatever. So the exchange part happens that our road goes into their one of the condominium's lots. Is that what the exchange is?
We own the land right now that would have been back in the horse and buggy days. The road was deviated for some reason. Cars couldn't traverse 20 Sideroad in its existing state today. And if you drive this portion, there's severe drop-offs on either side. So at one point, they decided that the former deviation did not satisfy the requirement for the municipality, so they upgraded the road. The horse and buggy could do right angles, take a right 90-degree turn, whereas cars started to progress in a different manner, and the curve of the road was substantially changed. They would have excavated the area and filled in this hole, whereas making a smoother transition road, leaving the deviation road still in the town's name, but unutilized. This is not the only, you can see the original road allowance is actually up here, which is another matter. That traverses in somebody else's property. We're not dealing with that today. But road allowances, at one point in the survey, when they surveyed all of Ontario, they didn't match. When this guy came from the east and that guy came from the west, they would hope that the tunnel boring machines, they were on either end of the tunnel, but when they did the survey, sometimes they didn't match. So they had to create things called deviation roads to correct these road allowances with respect to town ownership for municipal right-of-ways. And this is a good example of some of the outlying problems with the original land surveying of the road allowances that were laid out in the province.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up of a portion of the former deviation road allowance of 20th Side Road between County Road 18 and the 7th Line EHS, plus a road widening of a portion of the 20th Side Road, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Manctalo, seconded by Councillor Davey. Any further questions, comments? And does this formally bring to a close all of the issues having to do with the golf?
Yep, just some administrative features now. There's no, in my opinion, there's no issues left. Mono Hills seems happy with the town, and the town's happy with Mono Hills, so.
Good. Yes.
Has the county closed off the entrance off of Airport Road?
So my understanding is the owner of that unit and the county are in discussions with respect to access. But as it's 100% jurisdiction of the county, and that's outlined in our condo agreement. And like I say, Mono Hills is preparing to respond back to the town with a signature on the condo agreement, which will allow the registration of everything and individual mortgages or whatever needs to occur. So we'll have a condo golf course soon.
Mr. Dunmore, I'm not quite clear on the motivation for widening the road or getting a potential of widening the road.
So I'll bring this right back to 2012 when I first met you. When we were rehabilitating 5 Side Road, you were not a councillor of the day. You will recall that the Humber River lied on the south side of 5 Side Road, and we needed to move the road to the north. That's when I approached you and asked you we worked through the land widening of the 5 Side Road, and the town actually did the same widening process with you that we're doing with Mono Hills. There was a purchase agreement that we bought some of your land to move the road to the north, to facilitate the design of 5 Side Road when we paved it. In that case, the Humber River lied on the south side of 5 Side Road, and the engineering to get into working in and around a river tributary was a lot more expensive and moving the roadway system to the north. The similar situation lies with Mono Hills right now. In a perfect world, the road allowance is 66 feet, 20 meters. The road is right in the center of that road allowance, and the ditches work, the hydro poles work, the utilities, and everything works off of that standard cross section. In some locations, the roadways unfortunately didn't fall right inside the 66-foot road allowance, inside the 20 meters. This center line is pushed to the south, and should the town continue to, should the town ever decide to rehabilitate 20 Side Road, we will now have the property that will allow us to properly build a 66-foot road, typical road allowance. So we need more, and if you drive by there, you'll see on the north side of the road, it's straight downhill. There's no way we're gonna fill that, move the road, very similar to the fourth line road widening that we took. We may or may not needed that one, but yeah, there's no way that we could move this road to the north and build it properly.
Right.
So we need the land on the south side of it.
So given the present usage of the road, is there any reason for rebuilding it at this time?
So that's a big picture item. It was council priority. Council provided priorities back in 2012, and it has not come back to, during my tenure as Director of Public Works, it was not ever brought back to council based on the criteria that we utilized then. And council will be receiving the long-term roads need study in the future that will help identify and answer that question for or if any upgrades are recommended.
Okay, so there's no answer at this time, but there could be one in the future.
So as council will recall, my last capital report as Director of Public Works, we were focused on the blind line, 30 Side Road. There was another section that we're monitoring, and I can't, here Ontario Street. There were some key areas that we were concerned about, traffic counts and maintenance, and 20 Side Road was not one of them. Was no, so the answer is no. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, anything else? Any opposed to the motion? Motion's carried. Next item is something that I've worked with Fred Simpson on, and it struck me that we needed to better define levels of public consultation. In other words, if we decide to pause consideration of a bylaw at the first reading and put it out for public consultation, that there are several ways that that can be done, ranging from not complex to complex. The difference, for instance, between doing an online survey versus a paper survey. And so I've scribbled out something, sent it to Fred. He's substantially rewritten it to make it an appendix to the Citizen Engagement Charter, which I think is inspired. And it is not mandatory on every bylaw we pass, but if we make a discrete decision to engage the public, then it gives us a framework on how to do it and length of time out for consultation. So I'll just open up the floor for comments.
Yeah, I like it.
That's unusual.
I like it too. I like it a lot. I'm concerned it itemizes out specifically what's going to happen between first reading and second reading, but doesn't say anything about then between the second and third, which given some of our discussions in the past, I would like to see that is a separate entity, our actual having a third reading, and I'm happy with it. I'm not that happy with the citizen engagement charter. If we just append this, that's great, but the charter kind of it has, you know, the engagement is a promise, and it tells you all that and everything, but then it has an action plan that only went until 2022, which, you know, a lot of stuff happened. There was great movement on it and so on, but I don't know whether I don't know whether it needs, I mean, this is great to add, but I don't know whether this is where it should stop. I
Well,
kind
I
of would
think-
like it to
yeah,
be,
I think the citizen engagement document is a separate project. And what we're doing here is simply finding a home for this policy. This could be a standalone policy that when we choose to engage the public between first and second reading, these are the three ways that we go. Here's a timeline so it doesn't go on forever. As for the difference between second and third reading, I think the assumption, the underlying assumption is that there is no pause between second and third reading. We may find ourselves in a situation where we pause it, but I don't think there's anything more than sending it back to staff or something like that. It's not like we re-engage the public between second and third reading, because we've done that between first and second reading. Fred, does that make sense to you?
Your worship, I think under certain circumstances, particularly the level 3, second reading would also include an opportunity for residents to speak in council. So in that case, I think council could be in a position to receive those comments and then give direction on changes to the bylaw. So the bylaw would in fact come back for third reading with council's direction on modifications based on all input received up to and including second reading.
But I don't think the policy needs to explicitly say that. We just always have the option of sending something back to you as a result of the input that we've received.
I'd leave that up to council whether they want to state that explicitly or leave that to council to decide at the time.
I don't see any harm in just adding it, just so that it's not unclear. But I'm sorry, with respect to the engagement charter, I thought that the proposition today was to what's the word? Append this, no? Isn't that what the idea is?
Yes, my recommendation is that council, if they're going to approve this today, that they give direction for this to come back as being incorporated into the citizen engagement charter.
Gives it a home.
Which it gives it a home, but it also begs that it's only one step versus it being a standalone policy that then could be referred to in when we, fix up the citizen engagement in the future. Or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the citizen engagement piece needs probably a lot of work, and I wouldn't want to hold up the framework for the public consultation while we are doing that.
Right,
So
it's separate?
I mean, we could do it as a separate thing and then add it once we've tackled citizen engagement, but, I don't see the harm in having it as an appendix to citizen engagement, because it does remind us once again that the citizen engagement piece needs to be, re-engaged. Now I have a motion that we bring back. Now we're asking you to bring back an amendment to the citizen engagement charter to add the policy.
That's correct. So if council approves this policy, then it would be incorporated into the charter as an annex. So we're technically amending the charter by adding this policy. I completely understand your point, Councillor Davey, that there are other aspects of the charter that staff certainly would like to tackle. We've just held those off for other priorities. One of those things, as you mentioned, is the action plan. It's dated and should come back to council. It's just been a matter of fitting it into the workflow.
So what is the wish of council? Is it possible that we can we can make a small amendment, Fred, to say something along the lines of council may choose to exercise its discretion to further pause passage between second and third reading, something like that.
Something along the ideas can be added in it when I bring it back that incorporates the whole idea that second and third reading don't necessarily have to be concurrent. They don't have to be separate,
Okay.
but that is a direction from council
Yes.
as to how it proceeds at that point.
But in the meantime, we have a policy that governs our public consultation. I think that's the important piece.
I agree, and isn't there, but it's also, it's a policy specifically about our bylaws, which citizen engagement encompasses more than just bylaws, even though obviously bylaws are the bigger thing. There's no other home for it that it won't get buried, with respect to just our policies, just policies in general, that we have this, as opposed to putting it with the citizen engagement.
Well, just to the issue that this only deals with bylaws, the final sentence say, council may at its discretion follow this policy for purposes other than passing of bylaws. So we have some policy documents that would benefit from public input. So they don't get passed as bylaws, they get passed by council as policy documents. You know, there are not very many of them, and they don't happen that often. So it does have that flexibility, and I you know, as like, all I care about is that we have the framework in place, whether it's incorporated into the citizen engagement charter or not, doesn't, I mean, I like it, it's nice and neat, but I like the idea of having guidance for staff and something that causes council to make explicit decisions as to whether they want to engage this policy. And in a great many instances, we won't choose to engage it. But when it comes time to engage it, we know what we're doing, and not surprised that, oh, it didn't go out for a mailer or something like that.
I like it, although I would change the wording a little bit.
How?
Where?
Okay, so the last, thank you, that was the opener I wanted. The last paragraph, I think it could be, it's pretty soft, that nothing precludes us from doing something. Rather, I would prefer to say that council may undertake a more comprehensive public consultation. It's a minor point,
Yeah,
but
no, it's important.
Sure.
Fred, have you caught that?
Double negative to add a, sure.
So, Councillor Manctillo, you're referring to the final paragraph under level 3, that nothing in this policy precludes council?
correct.
And you're suggesting council may undertake a more
Yeah.
comprehensive?
Yes, yes.
Isn't that what it says?
Well, it says,
Well,
no,
it's a double
we don't
negative
need to
guide,
do it.
right?
We don't need to, but with nothing preventing us from doing it. I think it should give us more direction than that.
It's consistent with the use of the word may throughout the document as well.
And the very last sentence,
Yeah.
council may at its discretion follow this policy for other than, yeah.
Okay. So let's try this as a motion then. That we direct the clerk to bring back an amendment to the citizen engagement charter to add a policy regarding levels of public consultation when passing bylaws as amended. In other words, we've made that small amendment.
Always has an
Okay. And do I have a mover? Councillor Davy, seconded by Councillor Manctillo. Any opposition? Motion is carried.
So when are we bringing the citizen engagement review guy?
Well, let's maybe put that on the list. And I think we have bigger fish to fry, frankly.
Well, maybe we do, yes, but this would be one that would definitely lend itself to council and citizen input to help staff. No? Right? Maybe like some sort of a committee?
It is the, yes, so short answer.
So it's not necessarily adding terrible things to it.
Well, one of the things that probably needs to be addressed is the action plan. So the action plan may be staff.
Can we start with that first?
Yeah, staff looking at what still needs to be accomplished to achieve the objectives of the plan as it's currently written. And what we've achieved in the last 2 years and what we think can be done in the, going forward for the rest of this term. And then perhaps at that point, a broader review during the second half of council's term.
I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. Do we need to add it to our to-do list?
At some point, that should be formally added to the to-do list, your worship.
Can we save that for next, because we've already dealt with the to-do list, can we save that for the next meeting?
Oh, addition, when you said, or in addition to the meetings, okay. Okay, yes.
Okay,
Super.
so, next item is Schedule A, and I have a motion that we accept Schedule A to this agenda. Moved by Councillor Davies, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nix. Items for discussion. I think Ralph has been the only one who's submitted, but I could be wrong on that.
No, Councillor Manctillo submitted a number of items, and it started with item number 7, the AMO-OMA Joint Health Resolution Campaign.
I think everybody is aware that there are cracks in our healthcare system. And I thought that we should send a letter to, as actually requested here, which just supports the, this letter. My computer's just gone crazy. Anyway, that's basically, I think we should send a letter of support. It concerns me that they've just itemized one item, which is the shortage of doctors. That's what the one they're recommending, and it's more than that. It's a facilities a shortage as well, and equipment shortage, and we probably should be including all 3 of those. That'd be my recommendation.
Next item, Fred?
So,
Sir, we can,
so was there any direction by council whether they wanted to?
Send a letter. We direct you to send a letter.
I'm not sure. I'm in a, so Councillor Manctillo, do you and I sit down and draft a letter then to send on behalf of the town?
I'd be pleased to do that. And would include all 3 items rather than just the
Right.
physician shortage.
They've been working on the physician shortage.
They've worked on a few
But
things.
there are more physicians issues, physicians don't want to go where they're needed.
It's not a simple issue either. Once you start working on it, 8 or 9 years later, you have a new position.
so I think we've concluded that Ralph and Fred are going to collaborate.
So the next item brought forward by Councillor Manctillo was item number 9, the resolution from the CTC Source Protection Committee on the discontinuation of private well testing.
I think this has been handled. I think I sit on the board at NBCA. I sit on the board at NBCA, and they made a motion, but I think that they rescinded this already, so I think it's a non-issue. So I'll pass on that. And I'm having trouble finding I lost everything. Does anybody else have any other, while I'm trying to get back on
The human rights one is the next one.
I'd like to be able to talk to it from seeing it. Okay, it's coming up again. The next one was number 10, I believe. The Green Roads Pilot Project. This was, I wanted to have some more information about it, and Mr. Donor has given me that privately, but I'd like him to give it so that everybody is aware of it. St. Catharines are exploring a new material that's placed on roads for servicing it, and I asked asking Matt if you could tell us where this substance is in terms of, is it research, or is it something that we should be actually, that we know enough about that we should be considering using it?
Thanks, Councillor Mantilo. Yeah, I think it's fairly preliminary. We don't have a lot of information on it from Public Works, but it's certainly something to look into and monitor, and reach out to the supplier and other municipalities that are using it in their pilots to see how effective it is. Should be noted, it's meant for preparation to strengthen base materials rather than excavating the existing granulars, which is traditionally done to rebuild a road properly and get the proper bed of materials in there. I think what municipalities are attempting to do is pulverizing the existing granular layer and infusing this into it to create like a strengthening the base in preparation to putting asphalt on, or mixing it in with reclaimed asphalt material. So, like I said, we're constantly looking for new products and ways to, improve our roads, and that goes to our existing gravel, or when we go to rehabilitate a road. So it's certainly something to look into, and like I said, we're going to reach out to the municipalities that have tried it and monitor it. And
That clarifies one aspect. This is not a surface treatment that's done to an established road. It's a part of it, laying down new asphalt.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not meant to be used on an exposed gravel road. That's right.
Next item. Oh, go ahead.
So therefore, it's really not, it wouldn't be really applicable in Mono unless we were going to asphalt our roads or redo roads. And new things are often expensive, right? So
We just did this on the third line just north of Hockey Valley Road.
we use this bioresin stuff?
We used that new asphalt.
Oh.
So it would be a situation where you might consider it.
Or, and also on second line at Mono Center, we did too, right?
Yes,
Right.
yeah, so those would be situations where, if we noticed we had rutting on existing asphalt, which third line north of Hockley did have alligator cracking, and you knew the base, it was showing signs of poor base material, it's something that would maybe be looked at from a geotechnical engineers. We would do that as part of the consultant review. And if, if it's promising, it may work. Now, what I've looked into is, they're estimating that the initial upfront cost is there to apply the product, but they're expecting that it will extend the life of the asphalt road. So in this particular case, I think they're looking at, $25,000 to start, but it may end up additional cost right off the get-go, but they're hoping it'll extend it. Now, it's hard to know what that looks like down the road if it actually works, so.
Your worship, if I may just add, I'll ask this as an additive, Matt. So these are for bases that are considered substandard prior to paving, and there's no expectation to dig out the base. They're trying to save the emissions through full excavation by putting this product and experimenting that it will work. 10 Sideroad, for example, we had 19 inches of A gravel, so we didn't need to dig the base out. But there's some swamp areas that the cost benefit would probably not warrant proper construction.
Yeah, there's That's right. Like, there's so many variables when it comes into it. Like Mike just spoke of 10 Side Road between Highway 10 and here Ontario Street was reconstructed in 2012 and 13. Not fully reconstructed, but the outside edges of the asphalt were cut out, basically benched, because we apply maintenance gravel every 3 to 5 years on the center of the road. A lot of the time it doesn't get out to the outside travel lane, right? So that road we cut out. I don't know what this material would be like applying it over a whole road surface, if you could still get away with benching. Like, those are all the things that you still need positive drainage. You need to have your ditches below the granular road bed so it positively drains off. There's so many variables that come into it. And like we just spoke of benching on 10 Side Road when we cut out the shoulder to put in positive materials, so any material that does get down there could drain out. I don't know if it replaces that.
Thank you. Anything else, Fred?
That's number 11.
Okay, 11.
Or 10, I guess it is. This is the letter. This is the letter to the Minister of Labor about lithium batteries, and it concerns me because we all are aware that lithium batteries, when they catch on fire, creates a new problem. And if you sat in the fire board, you know that the fire chiefs are concerned about this. It's a big issue for them. What we're talking about here is non-OEM, non-original equipment batteries, and I wasn't aware that these were available. It sounds to me like they don't have to pass the checks that an OEM battery has to pass, and therefore they have qualities which make them more likely to spontaneously combust, particularly if they're overcharged. I think that's the issue. I don't know what the rest of you think about it. Is this an important enough issue that we should join with Outaouais South Monaghan and writing to the minister to bring his attention to the problem of lithium batteries that are not OEM?
Towneby. Yeah, actually, at our last fire board meeting, Melinda and I, our fire chief is quite concerned, and I believe actually had one battery that had whatever you call it, had put it out the back of the yard, and I can't remember, Melinda, but it burned for 2 or 3 days or something.
No, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a cost thing, right? I mean, you can see on Amazon, this battery versus the battery, the OEM one is, 3 times the cost. Well, I'll go with the cheaper battery, right? I mean, it's a very large problem that I don't know who us writing to is going to make a difference, but it is a true thing.
Letter of support?
I think so. I think it can make a difference, Councillor Davies, because if they can regulate importation and sale of these batteries. I make a motion that we have a letter of support.
I think we can do a direction.
So, Your Worship, I have prepared a starting point for a resolution for council to consider, and it's that we support and endorse the Township of Outaouais South Monaghan's letter to the Minister of Labor, Immigration, Transportation and Skills Development dated June 28, 2024, regarding regulations for the importation and safe use of lithium-ion batteries. Now, that doesn't specifically state a letter of support, but when council passes a resolution like this, I do send a letter with that resolution to the minister, to Deferred municipalities, and to the municipality who passed the resolution.
I couldn't hear the last. To whom?
A letter would go out, if council passes this resolution, a letter will go out to the province, to Deferred municipalities, and to Outaouais South Monaghan.
Would it go to our local MP?
Yes, it goes, when it goes to the province, that includes the minister and our MPP.
So for maximum coverage, should we not send it to all Ontario municipalities?
We can, but I do try to avoid sending them to all Ontario municipalities. I send them more targeted as opposed to every municipality in all of Ontario. All of Ontario is going to get this, has already received it at least once, and they'll probably get it 20 more times.
Just a point of clarification, they talk about aftermarket batteries are not Underwriter Laboratories of Canada certified, ULC. And then, the third last paragraph, we also call on all levels of government to enact regulations for the importation, sale, and storage and use of non-OEM or ULC certified lithium-ion batteries. I don't think they mean to say that there's a problem with the ULC certified.
No, they couldn't mean
And it's a small point, but
that. It's an odd sentence.
I mean, it doesn't jive with the other part, and
Oh, it should be read as non-OEM or non-ULC.
not, yes, they
That-
forgot a
that's
non, yes. So maybe in our letter, we should make that distinction. There's probably a role for Canadian Standards Association as well, because they do, CSA does electrical.
But UCL is like a CSA,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost, there's 6 of one, half dozen of another. Okay. So, Melinda, do you have anything? Oh, sorry.
Did we have a mover and seconder for that resolution?
Ralph moves. Fred seconds. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
No, I didn't have any additional Schedule A comments.
Fred? My only one, of course, is to revisit my favorite topic. I don't know about you folks, but I was quite depressed when I read the response. You know, it's a form letter. It doesn't address any of the issues that we raised. It doesn't even refute. I mean, I was hoping for a nice, lively debate about, oh, you're wrong, or, you know, this isn't the way it is, or anything else like that. And the saddest part was that one of the 6 recommendations that we made was for a joint working group between municipalities and MTO to talk to issues having to do with automated speed enforcement. And when I met with the minister, he seemed really interested in that, or at least appeared to be really interested in that. And I thought, finally, if we can get everybody around a table to talk about one thing, we could probably talk about other things. But I found it dismissive, frankly, insulting.
What would you like to do with it?
Well, I'd love to have a press conference and burn the minister's letter. But I've written to a wide variety of municipalities that bought in, the 20 municipalities that bought into our motion. I've written to others who are aware of it and who are interested in pursuing it. I'm going to await feedback to see what they think, but obviously it's on any agenda at AMO. And as I said earlier, I don't give up on this stuff. I just have to have some time in a dark room to figure out what the next step is, but I have a few irons in the fire, let's put it that way. Potentially. So that's my only item on Agenda A. So I believe we've had the motion on Agenda A. Reports of councillors. Fred, anything to report?
Yeah, just one thing very quickly to bring council and the public up to date on the last county council meeting. We had a delegation from a company called Strategy Corp that was looking at the service delivery of the county. Now, they interviewed all county councilors and all the CAOs, and they came up with a report. There's no recommendations in the report. They simply are reporting what the councilors and the CAOs think about county services. And I have three observations. The first is, and this is kind of nice, is that was no feeling among those people interviewed that we need any major structural change in Dufferin. Like, we don't need the regional municipality of Dufferin, we don't need to change any municipal boundaries. So the consensus was no big changes needed. The second observation I have is they looked at all the county services, and the one I'm going to point out are the services that they thought that the majority of people interviewed thought were unsatisfactory. And they were the building department, the planning department, economic development, and fire services, okay? That's kind of a touchy subject, but that's what their report says. It's touchy because in saying what people were thinking about county services, we are not pointing fingers at any county staff. It could be underfunding, it could be complexity, it could be a number of things, okay? All I'm saying is the consensus was those areas of county services are unsatisfactory according to the majority of people interviewed. The building department, fire services, planning, and economic development. My last observation is, and I didn't raise this at county council, but it's an odd one. The report was what people felt about county services. And one of the services that came out as unsatisfactory was fire. And here's the oddity. The county is not responsible for fire. So how the heck it got on the list is beyond me. I mean, there's other subjects that could have been services that could have been put on the list that weren't police. It wasn't on the list because it's not a county services. My observation, but I kept my mouth shut at county council, was fire protection is not a county service, and yet it was rated as unsatisfactory. I suspect there's an agenda going on here, which probably some of you know about. Anyway, that's my report.
I just add to that I think the reason planning was flagged doesn't have so much to do with the department as it has to do with the perception of overlap of services. Yeah. And, you know, I think there's no inherent criticism of the department per se, and I should indicate that there is a new staff senior manager of that department who's only been on the job for about a month.
And just on that, Your Worship, I did have a private talk with her, Raj.
Yes.
This is what we call her. That's not her full name, Mike, but I think you pronounce it Raj. And she did indicate she wants to come out and talk to you. I think she was inviting me, but that's your choice. I don't have to be there. It's just because I sort of nailed her and was talking to her about planning services. She at some point will contact you and come out to talk to Mono about how you see issues about planning services between the county and the municipality.
That's great, Deputy Mayor. She's reached out already. We're just trying to organize calendars.
Is the county planning any follow-up to this report?
John can probably speak to that better. The consultant's report was only to give us the information. They made no recommendations. What does the county do now?
Senior staff.
Okay, senior staff are looking at it, I think.
So senior staff are looking at it, and they're going to come back with some recommendations that flow from the analysis. But I think it's well done. The consultant who has a huge depth of experience in municipal affairs, and I've known her now for 30 years. She thinks that the province is going to go very gently for the time being on making our lives challenging. But after the next election, they may well be back with a vengeance to continue their insistence on trying to tell us how to do things. Ralph, anything?
Nothing.
Okay. Linda?
Thank you. I've been attending meetings at the CDRC and the fire boards that I sit on, and everything just seems to be swimming along. The fire board, we're in Shelburne working on a replacement for the chief that is retiring at the end of next month. CDRC, looking at future plans and trying to get a handle on where the center should go, since it's brimming with day camp and swimming lessons, and things are going along well. But no, there's nothing, no real news to report.
Okay. Staff, Les?
Just one item for next council meeting for council. Our auditors will be coming to present the financial statements. They would have been ready for this meeting, but the meeting looked pretty busy as it was, especially with development charges and the asset management plan. And then you'll probably see on the news tonight, I follow the business news. Inflation came down 2.7 for the month of June versus 2.9. That was in May. So now all the economists are excited that maybe the Bank of Canada may go ahead and have one more further cut, and like for July, instead of waiting till September. That's my report.
Matt?
Thanks, Council. I have a few items here. Happy to report we've received, Public Works received its newest addition to its fleet, new grader. It's replacing our 2005 Volvo, which is it's exceeded its life expectancy. We've had to help it along a little bit, but over the last few years, transmission and motor, obviously big things that are that usually occur at the 16, 17-year mark. So we're happy to have that there, and you should start to see it out in the roads as early as next week. It's our first CAT product. We've traditionally had Champion and Volvo and John Deere graders, so this is our first CAT. So we're
First hat?
Caterpillar. Yeah, so we're happy to have that. I mentioned earlier, our road management plan has worked, is moving along. I've received the draft, I've provided comments. Haven't heard back from the town's engineer yet, but I hope to have that in the next meeting, have that finalized by the next meeting to bring to council.
Can I ask a question on that? It occurred to me, Mr. Donor, when I listened to the asset management plan this morning, which I admit was on non-core assets, but going back to the core assets, which had been done earlier, and now we're going to have a road management plan, I guess the thought that occurred to me, your plan's going to look at everything from traffic volumes to whatever and decide, when we need to replace a bridge or when we need to pave a road or do whatever, right? Is that going to be in sync with what was in the core asset? Is there a possibility here of, not a conflict, that's not the right word, that your road management plan may come up with something that wasn't built into the core asset management plan? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. Economists and engineers are two different things. So it'll be interesting to see the result. The road management plan looks at roads. We have our biennial bridge inspections that we're required to do, and that we already have that plan. So that was removed from the scope from the road management plan. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the result as far as how they compare.
But I know that you do the biennial bridge inspections, but you'll still put that information into the road management plan, will you not?
It's considered. It's discussed in there.
I just thought
It's not
to give it one nice
comprehensive.
comprehensive map like
It's
Mike did in 2012. It should, if it was all in one place, it makes it easier reading for people like me.
For sure. We also have our culverts. My next item was, as council's aware, the last 10 years or so, we've had a bunch of significant road crossing culverts fail unexpectedly. So this year, town staff worked with the town engineer to use our existing database of what assets we have for cross culverts. We took that and we went out and we finished all the inspections in the spring on all the culverts. We started off with 150. We ended up with 213 cross culverts. So we identified a bunch of new ones. So we've identified the diameter, the length, the condition, and a priority list, a 10-year plan for that as well. So we have an idea what we need to do for culverts. So putting all these plans into one document is challenging. Like these are, we have storm plans as well. So when we identify a subdivision for reconstruction, we got to consider the deep services as well. So we reference these documents, and they're all specific to each piece of core infrastructure. So.
Or just to add to that, so in 2025, when they were talking about finalizing our levels of service, we'll provide them with the roads need study to update that, because that'll be all about core and non-core financial planning ahead. So we'll provide them with the new roads need refresh. And yes, I think to your answer.
Just on that, Matt, will your road management plan be showing County Road 8 as a municipal road? And are you building that into your plan?
So we knowing what's likely to come down the road, no pun intended. So we did assess Dufferin Road 8, and we assessed the structures as well. As part of, so 2024, we did the biennial bridge inspections with the town engineer, and then we also did the road review. So we did take it into consideration. The report does talk about it. The idea was to create a baseline for it from our perspective. We can measure it against what the county provides us at that time. But yeah, we did assess it, and it falls into the plan. You will see the road pop up throughout the plan and the discussion around it. But the idea was to incorporate it because we kind of have an idea what's happening, and we can plan for it.
Thank you.
So are we going to call it 20th Side Road or Mono Center Road, or what are we going to call it? Because it's already got so many names. It's all Mono Center Road, all the way
We just take
to
the word
airport,
County Road 8 off?
from 10 to airport, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it changes from 15 Side Road to 20, right? So, yeah. But, and then, so as council is aware, the last couple budget items Mike and I have talked about, the CLI ECA, the Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approval. We have some obligations by the province. We're mandated by the province to inspect our stormwater infrastructure and our sanitary infrastructure, and it was a comprehensive ECA. So we've been working with the town engineer to inspect all this infrastructure, prepare reports, and again, give us some marching orders and some recommendations as to what we need to do to make sure that these storm ponds, the buried storm infrastructure doesn't go unnoticed. Mike and I have been keeping a close eye on our storm infrastructure, but it is aging. And, storm pond cleanouts aren't cheap. Storm repairs for linear infrastructure, pipes and whatnot, and catch basins are not cheap to replace, so we're keeping an eye on that. So that report I have to review still, but we're hoping to have that finalized along with our operation and maintenance manual.
Can I just ask a question? At the last Credit Valley Conservation meeting, we were told the province has come up with new, I'm not sure if the word standards for things like stormwater management ponds. I think this is brand new. I think if you're using your engineering company, Burnsides, they probably would already know about these new standards or regulations. Anyway, I just passed that on. I only learned about this at the last Credit Valley Conservation meeting. Have you heard about these new?
Well, I think that's what the CLI is a set of standards for reoccurring inspections, management of excess soils, testing of the depth of sediment. There's a bunch of triggers that are coming out of the CLI that I think are these best practices that you're referring to.
You know, I just passed this along, if this is accurate, at the Credit Valley Conservation meeting, we were told that the municipality with the most stormwater management ponds in Canada is Brampton.
Makes sense. Every corner of every
A lot of hard
subdivision.
surface water
A lot of
there,
hard
too.
surface, right? Predating Toronto's, the requirements for Toronto's build, right? If Toronto was built today, it would have had the most. Brampton have significant and very beautiful parkland trails around their ponds at major intersections with high capacity. So hopefully to endure us through Hurricane Hazel.
Anything else, Matt?
Just the last thing, the RSSB event that's taking place this weekend in East Garifraxa. You could expect a significant amount of people at the Ag Center on 5 Sideroad for parking. They'll be shuttling coach buses to and from the event. They're expected, I believe it was 7,000 and change participants that will be at the Ag Center parking, coming, going from there. So there are 35 police officers that will be throughout the routes in Caledon, East Garifraxa, throughout the county, and south of Highway 9 as well.
We should point out at the last county meeting, we approved a new site plan in East Gary for this. And I think the total attendance it's attendance by ticket, so they have a handle on how many people are coming. I think it's 25,000
At least.
Yeah.
At least, if not more.
So only 7,000 are going to be parking at the Ag.
That's right. It's the majority of the people that are attending are controlled or parking at the Ag Center, and they're being shuttled. 33%, I think. Number might be off, but 33% of the participants are the people attendees. So we've expressed, Public Works has expressed their the concern with the intersections along there, so they've identified OPP for all those even east of the Ag Center, Hockley Road and Highway 10. There's going to be a lot of police presence. There's signage that's going up, be going up soon if it hasn't been already started, they will be activating, East Gary will be activating an emergency control group, which Mono Public Works will be involved with. So they'll be around on the day of the event, the days of the event, Saturday, Sunday. Yes, Saturday, Sunday. And if anybody else has any questions, Township of East Garifraxa has some FAQs, frequently asked questions on their website for any other questions or concerns. Stay away. Rib Fest is occurring on the same this weekend as well, so it's going to be a busy weekend in Mono and Orangeville and East Garifraxa.
Where is Rig Fest?
Main Street, I believe, Alder Street.
Fred.
That's it.
Thank you, Council. So just a friendly reminder, July 24th, next Wednesday, is the Town of Mono will be hosting their workshop in cooperation with the County of Dufferin for the Dufferin County Economic Development Strategy. So that's our turn to have our residents in. Now, I looked at some of the email lists for the Orangeville workshops that the county hosted. There was a significant number of Mono business owners that attended already, and we're hoping that they continue to work through Mono-specific economic development. So there has been some great turnouts, and I did recognize quite a few of the names as business owners in Coles and beyond. So that'll be at 6 p.m. in town, in the chambers here, and the gentleman from the county, will be hosting that. Received an email, I think it's favorable, from the EV charge program yesterday with respect to the application in cooperation with the Ministry of Transportation for electrical vehicle charging stations. As council will recall, we approved application for Menorah Pavilion for, I'm not going to quote the numbers, but I'm going to say 2, and we approved. Council approved an application for Mono Center, so I'm in step 2. I'm continuing our eligibility, and still no commitment yet required from the town, but we are moving through that grant application process. I'm also participating with the county with respect to their master housing strategy. The county has obviously hired a consultant with respect to that as well, and I'm working through that. They're looking to hear from the individual lower tiers with respect to what our thoughts are. I'm still focusing heavily on water and wastewater as being the first component of any development prior to moving thoughts forward in And I think water is our, in the Orangeville area is our biggest concern right now, and obviously wastewater and the relief disposal of that. So that was that's scheduled for Thursday, and other than that, there are a couple site plans I'm working on finalizing. There's a storage similar to Bluebird Storage on Highway 10 that's will be finalized very shortly. An addition to the Christian Academy School is occurring this summer, and that's in the final stages for building permit. And full throttle, I've been working with the applicant with respect to Violet Hill as well.
Could you, I know where we are with Argonne. Could you just refresh my memory? Where are we on the, was it the first line, second line development, the Roxborough application? Where does that sit?
So we're still in discussions with the applicant. As they noted to council during the meeting, they were willing to listen, hear what they heard what council, they heard what the public said, and they were going back to the drawing board, for lack of better words. And we have been in communication with them, but we're still waiting for an advancement on that file with respect to moving forward.
So when that file is advanced, or when they complete their rethinking, that'll go to our planning committee and I guess also our engineering firm for technical comment.
So right now, Meridian Planning, Nick McDonald, the town has hired them as a consultant on this file. You remember Nick from the meetings. And him and I will be sitting with the applicant. It'll follow the normal process then. Well, it'll depend on what the application looks like, actually. Because if there's no change in the current zoning, there's no requirement for planning committee, right? So if it adheres to our zoning bylaw as written today, there'll be no, and if there's changes, then it'll be required the zoning bylaw amendment with a draft plan of subdivision, draft plan of condo. Not sure what they're commencing with yet. Yeah, so it's in the wings still.
Well, is the expectation we'll see the next plan, either the revised plan or the same plan sometime this year?
You did call him.
Do we know?
Unfortunately, I can't speak for the applicant. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ralph has something to add.
Just recalled, something I think is quite important has happened at the Pollinator Garden. We've had a review and response process, which I think has been very good for us. We hired Sean James, who was one of the speakers at the Pollinator Festival, to do a review of the garden. In summary, he was very complimentary about it. We had some particular problems or concerns with the management of things such as the walkway, weeds, design concept process. And so he came up with a whole pile of recommendations. I think there were about 29. And we sat down and reviewed these one day with the management committee and some of the interested volunteers, and we came up with a program. And I think this has breathed a little new life into the organization a bit as well. And we're going ahead with these changes gradually through this year. So I just wanted you to know that this is I think it's an important thing. We're 7 years down the line from the beginning of the Pollinator Garden, and it was time to review where we're at and have somebody from the outside look in and say, hey, this is what you might think of. And it was very good that way.
Thank you.
Sorry, just Ralph triggered something in my mind with respect to the Hockley House. So I finalized that rearrangement with the OPP. They're happy with what Dufferin Board of Trade is doing. They're utilizing the building after hours, so we're able to fill the Dufferin Board of Trade is able to fill the building with new and upcoming businesses in Mono, but OPP is happy. So.
Excellent. Great. Okay. So, notices of motion, any? Seeing none. In-camera items, there are none. I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Mono in session 12-2024 held on the 16th of July, 2024, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mantelow, seconded by Councillor Davy. Any opposed? That motion is carried. And finally, I have a motion that we adjourn this meeting at 11 minutes past 12. Mover, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Mantelow. Any opposition to adjourning?
Oh, no, let's go on for a while.
I want a recorded vote. A motion is carried. Thank you, everyone.